Welcome back to our channel. Today we'll dive into a new case. The case of Kelly Bullwinkle. Kelly Bullwinkle was born in Petaluma, Sonoma County, California, United States. She is the only child of Diana Dolores Gonzalez, a Coast Guard sergeant, and Robert. When Kelly was 3 years old, her parents divorced and she lived with her mother. Despite her busy work schedule, Diana raised Kelly with love and dedication, and they often received help from Kelly's grandparents, Dolores Fuller and Jesus Gonzalez, who often traveled from Las Cruces, New Mexico to visit. Growing up, Kelly was a quiet and shy girl, but those who knew her were captivated by her delicate features. She had a deep love for animals, especially horses. Whenever she saw a horse, her face lit up with joy, and she eagerly asked her mother to keep one as a pet. Kelly was also passionate about music. She quickly learned to play the clarinet while still in elementary school, impressing everyone with her ability to perform complex pieces with incredible skill. In 1999, as Kelly prepared to start high school, Diana was transferred to Redlands, a picturesque city in San Bernardino County, California. The family moved in with Laura, a close friend of Diana's. The relocation brought major changes to Kelly's life. She had to meet new neighbors, start at a new school, and adjust to an unfamiliar environment, all of which proved difficult for her. Redlands East Valley High School, the largest in the city, and presented its own challenges. The school was divided into cliques, athletes, leaders, and laggards, making it hard for Kelly to find her place. Even walking through the noisy cafeteria at lunchtime felt overwhelming. Kelly often felt lonely and doubted her ability to fit in with her school community. To relieve stress, she turned to reading and started keeping a personal diary, which became her trusted outlet. Over time, Kelly took up mountain biking and joined the track and field team. Her dedication to sports paid off as she began to succeed in competitions. Eventually, one of Kelly's childhood dreams came true when her mother gifted her a horse as a reward for her efforts. In her third year of high school, Kelly became friends with two classmates, Rachel Schneider and Megan LaSmith. Like many teenagers, Kelly looked up to Rachel and began imitating her style. She dyed her hair red to match Rachel's, started shopping at thrift stores, and wore the same shade of red lipstick as her. In 2001, Rachel introduced Kelly to her other friends, including Kinsey Jean Nordman. Kinsey, a senior born in 1983 in Redlands, was the only child of Bruce and Deborah Nordman. Her father, a well-known local postman, and her mother, a devoted leader of a Girl Scout group, raised Kinsey in a loving and optimistic environment. From a young age, Kinsey was described by relatives as sweet, kind, and affectionate. She had a gentle nature, enjoyed football games and reading, and was passionate about helping sick and homeless animals, often turning her home into a temporary shelter for them. Her family fully supported her interests, creating a joyful and encouraging atmosphere. Birthdays were always memorable celebrations, and family trips were filled with happiness. Bruce enjoyed spending time with Kinsey's friends and often invited them on family outings. One frequent visitor to the Nordman household was Kinsey's cousin, who taught everyone how to surf. During high school, Kinsey grew close to a classmate named Damian Matthew Guerrero, born in 1983. Damian lived in a wealthy neighborhood near Redlands. Not much was known about his family, which included his mother, stepfathers, and brother. He was known for his arrogance and fascination with Gothic culture. His signature look included makeup, black and white outfits, and a vintage 1940s style hat. Girls admired him for his dark hair and enigmatic presence, while others were intrigued by his knack for turning any topic into a philosophical discussion, making conversations with him engaging. He often quoted lines from Quentin Tarantino films, as Tarantino was his idol. Even though he was weirdo, but Damian was both hardworking and academically capable. Under Damian's influence, Kelly underwent a significant transformation. She abandoned her sporty California style and adopted a gothic look. She developed a strong interest in writing articles about serial killers. She became interested in writing about serial killers, a subject she was very passionate about. She also became drawn to industrial bands, with Tool becoming her favorite. Her favorite movie was American Psycho. She and Damien often discussed the film's characters, Mickey and Mallory, with their classmates, praising them enthusiastically. Kelly's family disapproved of the changes in her behavior and began keeping a closer eye on her social circle. However, her cousin reacted differently. He welcomed Damien and even started visiting him frequently. The two grew close, bonding over shared interests and collections. They were particularly fascinated by a mysterious weapon Damien owned, which had once belonged to Damien's brother. Over time, Diana became increasingly concerned about her daughter's friendship with Damien. Despite her mother's strong disapproval of her relationship with Damien, Kelly refused to change her mind. This caused a rift between her and her mother, further straining their relationship. Diana believed that Kelly was only trying to mock her, provoke her, and draw attention to Kelly. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating at school that Kelly and Damien's relationship was more than just friendship. In reality, however, Damien was dating another girl, Jennifer. Jennifer, born in Redlands in 1985, was known for her bold appearance and impeccable sense of style. Damien fell for her almost instantly after their first conversation. They discovered they shared many interests, particularly in music and cinema. Jennifer attended building with Kelly, while Kinsey studied in a different building. Although different, Kelly and Kinsey quickly bonded over their shared love of writing. Eventually, Kelly joined the group formed by Kinsey, Damien, and Jennifer, who welcomed her without hesitation. Kelly began adopting not only the fashion choices, but also the behaviors of her new friends. This group displayed a deliberate disregard for social norms and seemed unafraid or even eager to be rejected by society. Immersing herself in this circle, Kelly created a virtual diary on LiveJournal under the pseudonym Anna, where she portrayed herself as a girl struggling with anorexia. Though this was untrue, Kelly was fascinated by the idea of taking on this new persona. At the same time, she began experimenting with illegal substances. Despite only dabbling in them, she started labeling herself as a banned substance addict. It seemed as though Kelly was determined to showcase her darkest, most flawed side. She deliberately became provocative and destructive. Wanting to fully embrace her new identity, she distanced herself from Rachel, who quickly noticed how negatively the group was influencing her friend. However, fractures soon developed within the group itself. The conflict was fueled by Kelly's growing and uncontrollable attraction to Damien, which Jennifer easily noticed. On top of that, Jennifer was irritated by the fact that Kelly, trying to please Damien, copied his style and behavior. The tension steadily escalated, and what had once been a normal friendship between the girls devolved into open rivalry. In 2002, the group had the opportunity to become the center of attention and spark a wave of discussions, which they seemed to enjoy. That year, Kinsey and Damien graduated from high school. Meanwhile, Kelly and Kinsey came up with the idea to attend prom together. They were not a couple, but the plan was driven by curiosity to see their classmates' reactions. They think that it could possibly create a scandal. During the party, the girls told everyone they were under the influence of banned substance and tried to persuade Damien to join them. Jennifer responded quickly, opposing the idea and urging Damien to refuse. Kelly became upset, believing Jennifer was acting out of jealousy. The tension escalated when Damien's date accused Kelly of lying, pointing out that Kelly was wearing the same shoes as Damien. This led to an exchange of insults, with emotions spiraling out of control. Then, as energetic music played, Kelly and Kinsey kissed on the dance floor, drawing the attention of their classmates. Many speculated that the kiss was merely a stunt to grab everyone's attention. A few hours later, the party ended, and with it, the friends stopped trying to show their worst sides. After starting university, Kinsey and Damien remained close friends and kept in touch with Kelly as well. They often went to the cinema, explored fairs in the city center. Among them, Kelly was the only one without a partner, and Damien was still dating Jennifer. When the trio couldn't meet in person, they stayed connected through chat, where they planned their next outings or shared music and posts they enjoyed. However, due to Jennifer's jealousy, Damien sometimes acted rudely toward Kelly when they met in public. In private, though, his behavior changed, and their interactions became much friendlier. By early 2003, Damien and Kelly confessed their mutual attraction and began a secret relationship. Kelly's happiness was hard to conceal. For Kelly, Damien was the first man who had been truly serious about her, making it difficult for her to resist him. Her life began to change dramatically. Through Kinsey, she got in touch with two local banned substance dealers, Jim and Bob. At one point, Jim and Bob demanded $100 from her to pay for banned substance, but Kelly had grown accustomed to getting them for free. As her addiction worsened, she began finding other ways to sustain her habit. She secured a part-time job at a restaurant. In the spring of 2003, Kelly and Jennifer graduated from high school, but their rivalry only intensified. Now considered a love destroyer, Kelly felt an overwhelming urge to publicly declare her relationship with Damien. She enrolled at Crafton Hills, just a 20-minute drive from her home, allowing her to stay close to Damien. Meanwhile, Jennifer was determined to turn Kelly's friends against her. Jennifer manipulated Kinsey and Damien into excluding Kelly from their group and even encouraged them to humiliate her at parties, inviting her only to mock her in front of others. That summer was a nightmare for Kelly. Her friends argued with her over trivial matters, publicly mocked her, and humiliated her. What hurt even more was that she couldn't understand why they were doing it. Despite this, Kelly, being sensitive and dependent, couldn't bring herself to cut ties with them. For the first time, she wished that Damien would leave Jennifer, but the opposite happened. Damien told Kelly their relationship was over and demanded Kelly stay out of his life. One of the people who had insulted Kelly decided to reveal her secret meetings with Damien to Jennifer, hoping to expose Damien, who Jennifer was planning to build a life with. However, even Damien's betrayals didn't come as a surprise to Jennifer. On September 2, 2003, Jennifer messaged Kelly, demanding an explanation. Kelly confessed everything and received a response filled with threats. A few days later, Kinsey and Damien came up with a cruel prank to play on Kelly. Knowing how easily she got nervous, they decided to take her to San Timoteo Canyon, also known as the Ghost Town. On September 11, while texting with Kelly, Kinsey suggested they go for a walk together. Trusting her friend, Kelly agreed. The next day, Kinsey and Damien headed to San Timoteo Canyon, equipped with a shovel. They dug a deep hole, planning to scare Kelly by making her believe they were going to kill her and bury her there. On September 13, 2003, at 4:20 p.m., Kelly told her family she was going out with friends and left in her Mazda Protege. She had hidden a small bag of banned substance under the waistband of her pants. After stopping briefly at an ATM, she continued driving and met Kinsey. Together, they smoked and casually chatted while walking. Later, Kinsey suggested they grab a snack. As they approached Kelly's car, Damien suddenly arrived in his black Honda Civic. Surprised, Kelly asked what he was doing there. Damien says he has a plan and wants them to join in. After some convincing from her friends, Kelly reluctantly agreed to go to the canyon, even though she didn't like the ghost town. When they were already there, at some point Damien walked away from Kelly and Kinsey for a few minutes, and that's when Kelly found herself face to face with a grave and a shovel. She didn't have time to realize what happened because Damien suddenly appeared in front of her again with a weapon in his hands. Later, the weapon activated unexpectedly. Seriously wounded, Kelly fell just a few steps from the pit. Kinsey became a witness of the scene. Damien began to justify himself, saying that everything happened by accident. Kelly was still alive at that time and was shaking convulsively. Damien, in a state of shock, handed the weapon to Kinsey and said that he could not do it again. Kinsey took the weapon and, without further ado, attacked Kelly in the head. After that, they put the body in a hole and buried it. Seeing an old orange sofa abandoned nearby by someone, Damien and Kinsey dragged it to a fresh grave and left the scene. In Kelly's car, near the Ontario Mills Shopping Center, they abandoned the car and keys, then changed clothes and returned to Redlands in Damien's car. A little later, they had dinner together and at 9:20 p.m. went to the cinema. Diana, Kelly's mother, was not at home at that time. She had gone to the sea. Her friend Laura was outside the city. In these circumstances, no one noticed Kelly's absence. However, when Laura returned on September 15, she discovered alarming signs: unsorted mail, lights on, and hungry pets. In addition, Kelly's answering machine had accumulated messages from colleagues who were worried about her due to her absence from work. Laura called the police. Officers began searching for Kelly and found her car within a few hours. When she received news that her daughter was missing, Diana immediately called friends and acquaintances for help. They launched a search throughout the city, the San Bernardino Valley, and the desert. The search for Kelly was assisted by a Hawk helicopter provided by the Coast Guard. The police, meanwhile, interrogated everyone who knew Kelly. The first on the list of her close friends was Kinsey. During the interrogation, she provided a reliable alibi, claiming that she had not seen her friend for a long time. She also admitted that they planned to meet on September 13, but Kelly suddenly stopped communicating. So Kinsey went for a walk with Damien. In addition, she mentioned the banned substance addiction of Kelly and gave investigators the contacts of banned substance dealers Jim and Bob, who could possibly point to Kelly's whereabouts. It turned out that the two were in custody on charges of carjacking, a fact that automatically put them at the top of the list of suspects in Kelly's kidnapping. However, once they were questioned, they began to deny any involvement in her disappearance and claimed to have an alibi. The Manns were involved in a series of crimes in the Redlands area, but had nothing to do with what happened to Kelly. Nevertheless, the police obtained a warrant to search their home and then excluded them from the case. Days passed in despair. Diana took out an ad and told the media about Kelly's disappearance. Kinsey also joined the search and supported the efforts. A few days later, a group of young men were exploring San Mateo Canyon. Something unusual caught their attention. An unpleasant smell emanated from a cliff next to an old sofa lying in the bushes. After they reported this to the police, officers immediately arrived and secured the area. Under the sofa, human remains were found sticking out of the ground. After that, the site was examined, and a cartridge case of a 9mm caliber was found during the excavation of a female body, which was urgently sent to the morgue for the appropriate forensic analysis. Days later, a preliminary autopsy report confirmed that the deceased was Kelly and that her cause of death was one of 2 bullet wounds. Diana was shocked by the terrible news. A wave of suspicion swept across Redlands as each of the young people came under scrutiny. Those questioned all became potential suspects, and rumors of Kinsey's involvement in the murder began to spread. The police searched the house where Kelly lived and confiscated her computer, on which a lot of materials for the investigation were found, hundreds of chats, threats from Jennifer, and much more. Jennifer was also interrogated, during which she denied her guilt. Simultaneously, there was no convincing evidence against her. When investigators questioned Kelly's cousin, he revealed that he had once seen Damien holding a small silver weapon. After further questioning, Damien admitted that his brother gave him a .25 caliber weapon last fall. He claimed to have thrown the weapon into a drainage well. Detectives searched the well after Damien provided its location, but found nothing. The investigation continued, and a bullet of the same caliber was later discovered in a chest of drawers. This bullet matched the cartridge case found at the crime scene. However, without the weapon, it was difficult to formally charge Damien. On November 3, 2003, the case took a significant turn. Jennifer, Damien's ex-girlfriend, went to the authorities and provided a statement about events that had occurred during the summer involving Kinsey, Damien, and herself. The following day, Kinsey was brought in for questioning. Under pressure, she confessed to being involved but claimed the situation had spiraled out of control unintentionally. Her confession provided enough evidence for an arrest, but in exchange for more information, Kinsey was allowed to return home. Once home, she told her mother everything. Her mother, Deborah, was shocked and unable to comprehend how or why her daughter could have committed murder. She was also baffled as to why the authorities had let Kinsey go. Feeling guilty, Kinsey called her boyfriend and confessed everything, including Damien's involvement. Understanding the gravity of the situation, her boyfriend reported it to the authorities. An hour later, Kinsey was arrested, followed by Damien. Both were charged with murder and faced life in prison due to their intentional use of a firearm. Their bail was set at $5 million each to ensure their presence at the trial. On February 17, 2005, the trial of Kinsey and Damien began. The prosecution argued that the crime had been carefully planned and executed with cold-blooded precision. They emphasized that this murder was far more severe than a typical teenage dispute. In his defense, Damien maintained that he never intended to harm Kelly and claimed that Kinsey was directly responsible for Kelly's death. Kinsey's defense, on the other hand, acknowledged the enormity of her mistake, describing it as monstrous, and expressed deep remorse for causing the death of her close friend. On March 9, 2005, Kinsey was convicted of first-degree murder and using a weapon during the crime. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision regarding Damien's involvement, leading to a delay in his case. 2 months later, a hearing was held where the verdict was announced. The judge described the crime as one of the most tragic and senseless cases he had ever encountered. Kinsey was sentenced to 45 years in prison without the possibility of parole and was sent to a women's correctional facility at California in Chino. In May 2005, after reaching a plea agreement, Damien was sentenced to 15 years and incarcerated at Chuckawalla Valley in Blythe. Kelly's grandparents, Dolores and Jesus, were present in the courtroom, their faces showing both sadness and relief. With a trembling voice, Jesus expressed his sorrow at being robbed of the chance to see their granddaughter grow up. Dolores shared that nothing could ever fill the void left in her life. Over time, her health declined significantly, forcing her to leave her job. In February 2014, Dolores passed away. In 2018, Damien was denied parole. However, on October 24, 2019, a special commission unexpectedly approved his parole. In March 2020, California governor reversed this decision, stating that Damien still posed a serious risk to public safety. In January 2023, Damien attended his final parole hearing and was granted parole, which reignited intense debate. County attorney voiced hope that the decision would eventually be overturned. For now, Damien remains in prison, awaiting the final outcome. Kelly Bullwinkle was a model student with a promising future. Her naivety, trust in people, and desire to be accepted by others ultimately led to her death. Kelly did not doubt the trustworthiness of her friends, even after they got her hooked on banned substance and treated her cruelly. Kinsey openly rejected her, put her in a bad light, and eventually took her life in their merciless, bloody game. The case of Chad Ensel. Chad was born and raised in Bismarck. He attended university, majoring in mechanical engineering and design. Upon graduation, he returned to Bismarck and began working as an engineer at a local company. Friends and acquaintances describe him as a simple and kind man. In addition to his engineering work, Chad is a coach for a youth baseball team. On weekends, he spends time coaching young athletes and playing sports. He always remains calm and is not someone who likes to cause trouble. His cheerful personality does not seem like someone who is suffering from mental problems or who is thinking about quitting life. On April 6, 2015, Chad shared on social media that he was dating a woman named Nikki, who is 3 years older than he is. Friends noted that he seemed very happy at that time. A year later, in 2016, they got married. Nikki had 2 teenage sons from a previous relationship and worked in transportation for a food company. She was confident and often posted selfies on her social media, with only a couple of photos featuring her sons. She has an erratic temperament and often expresses her frustration with store employees. This causes a lot of conflict, causing many people to choose to avoid communicating with her. In addition to her main job at a food company, Nikki also runs a small business that specializes in catering for events and celebrations, particularly in making sweets and baked goods. She has been successful in this field, with many appealing creations showcased on her social media pages. On the outside, she and Chad appear to be a successful couple. He works at a large company in a managerial position, while she balances her job at the food company with running her own business. They raised 2 children together, and everything seemed to be going smoothly until January 2, 2020, when Nikki had to call emergency services. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on January 2, 2020, 911 emergency services received a call. The incident took place 15 minutes from Bismarck, North Dakota, at a farmhouse surrounded by cornfields. The caller's name was Nikki. She said she had been unable to contact her husband, Chad, for several days and decided to visit him. However, when she arrived, she could not enter the house because it was filled with smoke. She couldn't see what was happening inside but believed her husband was there. Emergency responders, including paramedics, firefighters, and police officers, quickly arrived to help. Upon investigation, they discovered that the fire had started in the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, where Chad was thought to be. Firefighters swiftly extinguished the flames and later found the charred body of a man lying on the bedroom floor. He was completely naked and had some sort of weapon placed on the bed, but away from his reach. This suggests that someone moved the weapon there, as it was not possible for him to have injured himself and then moved the weapon on his own. Police quickly determined that Chad had inflicted the injuries on himself. However, the lack of burns from a weapon suggested that the injury was likely caused by a distant impact. It could have been caused by a gas heater, which is known to be a dangerous source of heat that can cause fires. Despite the risks, gas heating systems remain popular in the United States due to their affordability and convenience. When the police arrived at the basement, they found another source of ignition, a badly burned stove on the lower level. The stove may have overheated during use and become the starting point for the fire. The entire situation was riddled with inconsistencies. The crime scene looked like a poorly staged incident. The strange points in this case are becoming more and more clear. Chad and Nikki lived together and raised their children together. So why is she away from home for many days? This caught the attention of the police, who began questioning people close to the family. Chad's friends and co-workers said they had not seen him for days. This was strange because he was a department head and did not usually miss work. Chad was very responsible, so it was unusual for him to miss work. At the very least, he would have called his supervisor to let them know he could not come in. Concerns grew. Chad was last seen on December 30, 2019, when he was captured on surveillance cameras at a local bowling alley. The next day, he did not show up for work. His wife, Nikki, called the company to inform them that her husband was seriously ill and needed a few days to recover. January 1 was a holiday, but on Monday, everyone at the company expected him to return. Yet he did not appear. Co-workers decided to call Chad to check on him. However, they were unable to reach him, prompting them to call the police to report the situation. They subsequently requested a welfare check on him. At approximately 1:20 p.m. on January 2, 2020, the police arrived at Chad's home. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. After waiting for a while and looking through the windows, they saw nothing unusual. The house was quiet. They did not conduct a thorough search or enter the home, believing they did not have the authority to do so. They assumed he had gone out to celebrate the holidays. They reported back to Chad's company that he was not home and that they could not assist further. They then left. Chad's co-workers suspected something was wrong, so they contacted his wife, Nikki. She stated that she was at work, but promised to check on him as soon as she got off. At 5:30 p.m., she called 911 and reported that she could not enter the house due to a strong smell of smoke, particularly in the room where Chad's body was found. Forensic scientists uncovered clear signs of arson. A mattress had been burned, possibly by a nearby gas heater. There were cigarette butts and empty whiskey bottles on the floor. However, the police were particularly puzzled as to why Nikki and the children were not home under the circumstances. Why had she and Chad not seen each other for several days? Detectives invited Nikki in for questioning to gather more information about the case. She was deeply affected by her husband's death and expressed her distress, mentioning that he often smoked inside their home, which she suggested might have caused the fire. Her testimony made investigators suspicious. They believed that her husband's death was not an accident, but a deliberate murder, so they continued to question her. Nikki then explained why she had been absent from home, stating that the stove had broken down and she had to temporarily stay in a hotel because she couldn't stand the cold. However, the strange thing was that the children were not with her or Chad, but living with her mother. During her account of the events, she unexpectedly mentioned that she had to move the children because Chad, her husband, was a cruel alcoholic. She had never mentioned anything negative about him before, only positive things. However, she now stated that both she and the children had been abused by him. She had many photos showing the bruises and injuries her husband had caused. She admitted to the police that she and her children had moved away to escape her abusive husband. Nikki found a job in a new place and was preparing to move in a week. However, her plans changed drastically with the death of her husband. Now that she had no need or reason to run away, she decided to stay. At that time, the investigators had no evidence against Nikki, so they released her, but continued to treat her as a suspect. The next day, the autopsy results came back. Forensic experts discovered that Chad had suffered severe facial injuries from a weapon, and the entire front half of his body had been burned. He was lying on his back when the fire broke out, which resulted in less burn damage to his back, where experts found bullet marks. Obviously, he couldn't have injured himself in the back with that bullet, and if he had intended to end his life, there would have been much simpler ways. The cause of death was determined to be injuries from a weapon, and Chad had died before the fire broke out. There was no soot in his airways, and the forensic expert concluded he had been dead for several days, meaning he could not have ignited the fire. It was clearly not his doing. Someone murdered him and tried to make it look like he took his end life. With these details, Nikki became the prime suspect. Nikki contacted her insurance company to claim compensation for the damage to her property after the fire. Investigators discovered that just days before the fire, on December 26, the family had registered their home with the insurance company. Less than a week later, the house burned down under suspicious circumstances. Furthermore, during the police investigation of the crime scene, they discovered a package in the kitchen addressed to a man named Earl Howard. This new suspect needed to be investigated, and he was found quickly. In her initial interrogation, Nikki claimed she had rented a hotel room. However, it was later revealed that the room was registered to Earl Howard, the man named on the package. He was an ordinary working man who spent most of his free time at home. Originally from Canada, he had moved to Bismarck, North Dakota, USA, for a job opportunity. Soon after, Nikki was taken back to the police station for questioning again. The detectives began asking her leading questions about Earl. Initially, she denied knowing him, but then she unexpectedly admitted to having a relationship with him. She claimed that they had been having an affair for a year, that Chad knew about it and accepted the situation. She then maintained a relationship with Earl. During this time, her alcohol consumption increased, and she faced frequent insults from Chad. Throughout the interrogation, Nikki portrayed herself as a victim. She cried often, but sometimes spoke so softly that the police had to ask her to raise her voice. Experienced detectives suspected she was being insincere and was merely trying to evoke sympathy. After being pressured, her attitude changed, and she stopped crying. She realized that tears could not convince the detectives. So after being advised, she continued to tell the story clearly. Nikki finally provided details about the incident that led to Chad's death on the evening of December 30. That evening, he went to his favorite bowling alley and played for a few hours, then went home. At that time, Nikki was at a hotel with her lover, Earl. She planned to return home later that evening to gather her belongings before their trip to Texas. When she got to their house, she found Chad drunk and he started abusing her again. He physically attacked her, and she stated that during such moments, she would simply leave. However, Nikki then shifted the conversation to more abstract topics. She expressed frustration about Chad's drinking and gambling losses. The investigator had to press her again to continue answering questions. Unexpectedly, she revealed that she had returned home that night not alone, but with her lover, Earl. Chad was clearly upset by this and started yelling at her, prompting her to leave the house. Nikki claimed to have heard a heated argument and a struggle between Earl and Chad, followed by a bang. However, she did not ask Earl what happened. According to Nikki, they simply got into the car and drove away in silence. At this point, Nikki wrote a confession and placed it on the table. Then she decided to tear the paper. However, the detective quickly grabbed the confession from her hands. This action further aroused suspicion, leading the police to conclude that Nikki was involved in the death of her husband, Chad. Furthermore, while investigating the crime scene at Chad's home, detectives found a surveillance camera. They retrieved the video footage, which revealed crucial information. Earl and Nikki arrived at the house around 10 p.m. on December 30, approximately half an hour before Chad left the bowling alley. They went inside and spent about 20 minutes in the house before coming out with several boxes. This was important evidence, as it indicated that Nikki was at the crime scene before Chad's return. Detectives theorized that she was potentially removing her possessions to protect them from a planned fire, which enabled them to charge her with premeditated involvement. It was important to fully restore the evidence, as the circumstantial evidence alone could seem unconvincing to the jury. After this, Chad returned home around 10:30 p.m., seemingly unaware that Nikki and Earl had been at their house. Just before 1 a.m., Nikki and Earl returned to the house. They went inside, and shortly after, nearly all the security cameras stopped recording. Only one camera, which monitored the driveway, continued to operate. This limited footage did not capture everything that occurred afterward. They eventually left the house and drove away. Cigarettes found inside matched those smoked by Earl, but none were fully smoked. They appeared to have been lit and then carelessly discarded on the furniture and floor, creating a fire hazard. This suggested a deliberate setup. Moreover, it was revealed that Nikki was the sole beneficiary of the house insurance policy, valued at $26,000. She was arrested on January 7 for conspiracy to commit murder. Although her bail was set at $500,000, she could not afford it and remained in jail. Additionally, Nikki had 3 previous convictions for fraud and was on house arrest at the time of her arrest. Investigators went to Earl's house to arrest him and take his statement, but he fled. However, he was not able to evade justice for long. 2 days later, he was arrested in Michigan, near the Canadian border. He was trying to escape to his home country to avoid prosecution in the United States. When arrested, he did not resist. After the arrest, police gathered more information from him, which helped clarify the incident of that night. Nikki and Earl had more motives for committing the crime than just collecting an insurance payout on the house. Their relationship lasted for over a year. At one point, she shared with Earl that Chad had a $600,000 life insurance policy. They believed that this money could solve their problems and allow them to live comfortably. She wanted to avoid the complications of divorce and the division of assets, so she chose a darker and more lucrative option. They planned to kill Chad and make it appear that he took his end life. Their goal was to collect all the insurance money they could, both life and property, and then run away to Texas together. On December 9th, they finalized their plan and set it into motion. To prevent her children from witnessing the crime, Nikki sent them to stay with their grandmother. Knowing that Chad was going bowling that night, Nikki went to their home early to gather belongings she wanted to save from a fire. CCTV footage from the hotel captured her and Earl bringing their items to their room. Later, they returned to the scene of the crime, where Nikki disabled the cameras and the security system. Earl was armed, but it is unclear who actually killed Chad, as they blamed each other. Apparently, the murder happened while Chad was sleeping. He was attacked in the back. He died instantly. Then his body was turned upside down and his face was attacked to make it appear that he had injured himself. Earl and Nikki thought that burning the house down would destroy all evidence, making it difficult for forensics to find any clues. They then scattered whiskey bottles around the house to portray Chad as a heavy drinker. Finally, they put a gas heater in the room, lit it, and left, expecting it to cause a fire. The following day, they anxiously awaited news of the incident, but nothing came. Frustrated, they returned to the house and discovered some small, weak fires that had already gone out. To ensure a more effective blaze, they rearranged the mattress and other items to facilitate burning. Earl went down to the basement and started a fire directly above the stove. Meanwhile, Nikki scattered cigarettes around the room, believing their plan would succeed. They left, but for the next 2 days, there was no news about the fire. Fearing their plan had failed, they returned to the scene. On January 2 at 5 p.m., when Nikki opened the door, a backdraft caused the fire to flare up. However, their plan failed, as the house did not burn down as they expected. During the investigation, detectives discovered fingerprints and DNA evidence from both Nikki and Earl. The poor staging of the scene was quickly discovered. Even the placement of the weapon on the bed suggested an attempt to mislead the investigation. If Chad injured himself, the weapon wouldn't be placed that way. This detail became a key argument for the prosecution at trial and was persuasive to the jury. Nikki and Earl were charged with murder. At the last minute, Earl agreed to a plea bargain, which allowed the prosecution to learn all the details of the crime. Earl Howard pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit arson and tampering with evidence. As a result, he received a 25-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after serving 21 years. During the trial, he and Nikki blamed each other. Earl's plea deal included testifying against Nikki. In contrast, she maintained her innocence, claiming she was outside when the shooting occurred and that Earl was the shooter. She also accused Earl of lighting fires and throwing away cigarettes. During a subsequent interrogation, Nikki told bizarre stories. claiming that Chad was aware of her affair and had allowed her to meet Earl. She also stated that Earl and her husband were friends. Nikki described her husband as an alcoholic, but those close to the family disagreed, stating that Chad did not drink heavily, did not abuse Nikki, and would not permit her to be with Earl. Chad never made anyone doubt his character. No one had ever seen him drunk, and he always prioritized his family, career. Therefore, no one believed that he was a bad husband. They thought Nikki had fabricated the stories right away. On February 17, 2023, Nikki Ensel was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and attempting to cover up the crime. On March 16, 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years, plus an additional 15 years for arson. The sentence was controversial, as Nikki's punishment was harsher than Earl's, despite evidence that he played a key role in the crime. The disparity in sentencing was attributed to Earl admitting guilt and cooperating with the investigation, while Nikki did not. However, the court's decision was final, allowing her to file her first appeal as early as 2026. The case of Becky Friedli. On September 17, 2006, at 9:51 p.m., a passerby saw large clouds of smoke in the distance and quickly called emergency services. The smoke turned out to be a fire at the Friedli family home. Firefighters quickly extinguished the blaze, but it was too late. Vicky Friedli, 53 years old, and her husband, John Hayward, 55 years old, had died. Forensic experts later revealed that Vicky had been attacked in the head, and John had suffered injuries from being attacked in the chest. The case became even more grisly when the burned body of 18 years old Becky Friedli, Vicky's daughter, was discovered. Her body was found in a wheelbarrow outside the house, and experts have not been able to determine the cause of her death. The house that burned down belonged to Ron, who had built it for his family, including his wife Vicky and their 3 daughters, Drew, Tanya, and Becky. He had chosen a safe and quiet location in the mountains to provide his daughters with space to play and entertain themselves. Vicky was a devoted mother, teaching her daughters to cook and assisting them with household tasks. She enjoyed gardening, sewing, and preparing delicious meals. The family seemed happy, but over time Ron and Vicky grew apart. After 13 years of marriage, they divorced and Ron moved out, leaving the house to Vicky and their daughters. Sisters Drew and Tanya eventually moved out of their mother's house, leaving their youngest sister Becky behind. Shortly after, Vicky began a relationship with John Hayward, who also had an adult daughter. John moved into the Friedli home, and they all lived together until a tragic incident occurred in September 2006. Friends and acquaintances of the family were baffled by the crime, not knowing who could have committed it. Rumors spread throughout town, with some claiming that Ron was responsible for the fire. However, he denied any involvement and showed deep concern for Vicky and his daughter, often crying during interrogations. His older daughters, Drew and Tanya, did not believe their father could commit such a horrific act. Investigators asked Ron to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to and passed successfully. Police later reviewed Ron's phone records and determined he was about an 11-hour drive from the scene of the fire, leading them to rule him out as a suspect. Further investigation revealed that the target of the case was Becky. Her father, Ron, shared that she had been terrified of fire since she was very young. Once, while her mother was cooking soup, Becky accidentally spilled it on herself, resulting in a third-degree burn that left a permanent scar. Since then, she had experienced intense fear whenever she saw fire. Becky's friend Jenny McDaniel told the police that she believed Robert Pape was responsible for the incident involving the Friedli family. Burned photographs were discovered at the scene, including one of Robert. He was Becky's ex-boyfriend. They had a seemingly happy relationship during their 1.5 years of dating in high school. However, Robert's behavior became increasingly concerning over time. He grew excessively jealous and controlling. About 10 months before the incident, when Becky was on holiday with a friend, he would call her 20 to 30 times a night, demanding to know where she was and who she was with. In January 2006, Becky broke up with Robert. He found a new girlfriend but continued to call her to control her, which only made things worse. She told Jenny that he had come to her home 3 weeks before the tragedy and threatened her with violence. He told her that he didn't want to share her with anyone and that she should belong only to him. However, she and Jenny didn't take his statement seriously, thinking it was just a joke. After her death, Jenny informed the police about everything, but it turned out that they were already watching Robert, and he was on the list of suspects. Robert and Kristen maintained that they were not at or near Becky's house the night of the fire. However, Kristen later shared a different version of incident. They tried to stop by Becky's house but found it closed. They then went to Kristen's house, where they spent the day playing video games. After 7 p.m., they drove to the high school to attend a game, but no one confirmed that they were there that day. According to cell phone records, at 7:13 p.m., Robert was at a different location than the one he claimed, on the road leading to Becky's house. Meanwhile, Kristen's phones were turned off from 7:30 p.m. to 7:32 p.m. At the time, Robert was married to a woman named Sarah, whom he began dating shortly after his split from Becky. He was actively involved in his church, helping others, while Sarah dedicated her time to animal welfare. Kristen was also married. His father, John Smith, described him as a nobleman who had served his country for 5 years in an elite army regiment. He became a hero in Afghanistan after saving the lives of 3 fellow soldiers and received an award for his bravery. He also earned a medal for injuries sustained from shrapnel during a grenade explosion, which severely damaged his arm. In 2012, Private Detective Luis Bolaños, a longtime colleague of Ron, offered to help Ron solve the case. He accepted Luis's help because he had lost faith in the police's ability to find the culprit. Detective Luis spoke with Becky's close friends and family, including her sisters and colleagues, and uncovered new, crucial information. Becky's cousin Daniela recalled that the day before the fire, she called him to say that Robert had come to her workplace at the cafe and started bothering her. They had a fight that day, and he was even thrown out of the cafe. Detective Luis has been gathering information about Robert and Kristen. Their friends describe them as good people, but when they are together, they create a dangerous relationship. They had a particular interest in fire. One friend shared a concerning incident in which they set her mattress on fire, leaving her frightened and angry with them. Investigators discovered that Robert had sent a disturbing text message to his girlfriend, Sarah, who was in a complicated relationship with another man. In the message, he suggested that if he knew where the other boy lived, they could professionally burn his house down. Robert and Kristen insisted that they were not at or near the Friedley house on the night of the fire. However, Kristen later shared a different version of events. They tried to stop by the Friedley house but found it closed. They then went to Kristen's house, where they spent the day playing video games. After 7 p.m., they drove to the high school to attend a game, but no one confirmed that they were there that day. According to mobile phone records, at 7:13 p.m., Robert was at a different location than he claimed, on the road leading to the Friedley house. Meanwhile, Kristen's phones were turned off from 7:30 p.m. to 7:32 p.m. Investigators suggested that Robert and Kristen intended to confront Becky, and that Vicky and John happened to be there. Evidence showed that they attacked Becky near her house, forced her into a car, and set her on fire. Police found a business card with Kristen's DNA at the location where Becky was discovered. Inside the house, they attacked and killed Vicky along with John. They then set the house on fire and fled the scene. 6 months later, the district attorney's office subpoenaed Robert Pape and Kristen Smith, charging them with the crime. However, the families of Robert and Kristen remained skeptical about their involvement and decided to advocate for their release. Robert's attorney argued that the charges against him were based on hearsay and unreliable evidence. The lawyer claimed that Daniela had lied about Robert visiting her at work the day before the incident and that they had argued. Daniela's testimony could not be verified, and Robert's text message to Sarah about burning down her friend's house was simply a joke. The attorney also claimed that he was not jealous or controlling, that they had broken up, and that he was happy in his new relationship with Sarah. Kristen Smith's attorney contended that he had no motive to commit the crime, as Becky was neither his girlfriend nor a friend, and he held no ill feelings toward her. The attorney pointed out that the fact that Robert and Kristen did not use their cell phones that evening did not prove that they were at Becky's house, since they were playing games and did not have their phones with them. However, Robert's phone was recorded by cell towers as ringing at 7:13 p.m. near Becky's home. FBI experts noted that cell phones at high altitudes, like Becky's house, can sometimes connect to different towers, but this did not matter because there was physical evidence that Kristen was near her house, a business card with his DNA on it. His attorney countered that Becky could have taken the card from Kristen earlier and suggested that she might have lost it near her house during a walk. The attorney suggested that Becky's close friend, Javier, might be responsible for the Friedli family's deaths. Javier was the first person to inform the police that Robert and Christine were going on a hike with Becky. Friends of Becky said that Javier was in love with her and wanted a serious relationship, but she only viewed him as a friend. Robert and Christine's attorneys noted that there was evidence that Javier was near Becky's house that night, as he was tracked via a phone call. Additionally, Javier's father worked as an investigator in the district attorney's office, raising concerns about bias, but they asserted that Javier was not involved in the crime. Instead, he assisted the investigation and was cooperative throughout. It was revealed that Javier was indeed in the area that evening, because he intended to join Becky for the hike with Robert and Kristen. However, when he called Becky to confirm, she told him not to come. After that call, he decided to turn around and go back home. The court proceedings continued, and Robert and Kristen remained in jail. Kristen's father visited him every Saturday. Soon, Kristen became a father but missed the birth of his daughter Zoe. Meanwhile, a new prosecutor took over the case and urgently called for the charges against Robert and Kristen to be dropped. Just 2 hours later, they were released. Robert was greeted by his family, including his parents and wife, Sarah. A year later, by the end of 2015, Robert and Sarah divorced. In June 2016, both Robert and Kristen were arrested again for the triple murder and arson of the Friedli house. This arrest was based on a witness who claimed that Kristen had confessed to him about the crime. Years later, in January 2018, forensic experts used modern technology to match fingerprints that had not been available in 2006. The trial for the case began in April 2018, where Robert and Kristen pleaded not guilty. The court proceedings lasted about a month, and the jury deliberated for 10 days before reaching a verdict. On August 10, 2018, nearly 12 years after the Friedli family was killed, Robert Pape and Kristen Smith were found guilty of a premeditated crime, and both received life sentences without the possibility of parole. The case of Nordal Lalande. On August 26, 2017, in Le Pont de Beauvoisin, Isère, a wedding ceremony was taking place. During the ceremony, no one realized that a stranger had quietly appeared and joined in the joyful atmosphere. He only knew a few people at the ceremony, and he seemed to have his own plans. Among the guests was 8-year-old Maelis Araujo. While everyone was having fun, their mood suddenly changed when Maelis disappeared. This made her family panic. They searched but could not find her. They contacted the police for help. Soon after, the police team arrived and began the search. They searched the entire area and all possible locations she might have gone to. Search dogs and a helicopter from nearby Grenoble were deployed, and additional support was called in. Melis was not the first child to go missing in the area. Between 2007 and 2017, there were numerous disappearances, many of which went unreported or were closed without any leads. No one knows what happened to these children. It is likely that one or more individuals are the perpetrators. The incident left everyone in France very worried. Parents handed out flyers, and local shopkeepers put up posters of Melis in their storefronts. The community was aware of previous disappearances in the area, and so were the local gendarmes. However, at first, no one connected Melis's disappearance to the earlier cases. Despite rumors of a serial killer, the police had yet to apprehend a suspect for a decade. This was because these criminals often operated according to a certain pattern. The missing individuals seemed to vanish without a trace, and most search efforts yielded no results. When Melis disappeared, people began to wonder if all these cases could be linked. This raised another pressing question. Why had the authorities been unable to find any clues until now? This has caused public outrage, and they have accused the police of ineffectiveness. 5 days after Melis went missing, the police had no leads. Detectives tried to comfort her family, but they knew the chances of finding her alive were very low, given the time that had passed. Then, a man named Ludovic came forward. He was a guest at the wedding and believed he had important information for the investigation. Ludovic was a close friend of 30-year-old Nordal Lelandais. Ludovic explained that he had crashed the wedding. He didn't have an invitation but attended in place of his cousin, who was invited but could not come. His behavior seemed suspicious to the other guests, but they assumed he was just drunk. He eventually agreed to go back to the table, but then vanished. Nordal was so intelligent that even Melis's mother did not realize something was wrong until it was too late. Ludovic thought Nordal should be investigated. Although they had only briefly met, he had gained the trust of many guests. Throughout the evening, he had come across as friendly and approachable. Melis's mother even had a brief chat with him about her family's 3 dogs. He later offered to show Melis his dogs, which made her mother let her guard down. Her mother later admitted that she never thought her child would get into a car with a complete stranger in the middle of the night without telling her parents. There were a lot of people present, so it was puzzling that Melis could disappear without anyone noticing. The kidnapper clearly took steps to hide their actions. One guest recalled seeing Melis exit through the back door alone. Her parents last saw her around 2:30 a.m. When they realized she was missing, they immediately began searching for her. By that time, Nordal had already left, but soon returned. He approached Melis's mother, expressing surprise at the situation. When she asked if he had seen her daughter, he calmly said he had no idea where she was. He offered to help with the search, but then claimed he felt sick from the wine he had consumed. In another case, Eric Frey, 48, moved to Le Pont de Beauvoisin, Isère, with his girlfriend in 2016. They had a serious relationship and big plans for the future. However, shortly after moving in, Eric suddenly disappeared. He walked to a bakery just 15 minutes from their home but never returned. He left his belongings behind and took only a bank card, which suggested he would return soon. His girlfriend and a neighbor searched the area but couldn't reach him by phone. After several hours of searching, his girlfriend went to the police station to report him missing. Unfortunately, the officers were skeptical and advised her to wait 48 hours before filing an official report, reasoning that he was an adult who could have left on his own. Not wanting to wait long, she initiated her own investigation and requested CCTV footage from the bakery. The video showed Eric buying bread and chatting briefly with the cashier. It was clear he disappeared on his way home. She then contacted the police again, but they still found nothing. A year later, in 2017, she came across a news report about another disappearance, Melis's disappearance. She immediately thought that her boyfriend's case and Melis's case might be connected, potentially involve the same perpetrator. Eric's girlfriend believed that the bakery's surveillance cameras could provide a vital clue to the case. The police examined the footage and compared it to the wedding guest list to find any matches. During the investigation, a witness, Erica, provided information suggesting Nordahl's possible involvement in the case, and this information was reported in the media. She studied his photo carefully for a while. She then reviewed the videos and noticed a striking resemblance that seemed more than just a coincidence. At the same time, France was facing a serious problem. The number of disappearances was increasing. This rise had made the public worried and angry, as it seemed that criminals were becoming bolder. In Chambéry, about 4 months before Melis's disappearance, the body of 20-year-old Arthur Neuer was found in a river and was determined to have drowned. However, his family disagreed with that conclusion from the inquest. The police discovered that from April 11 to 12, 2017, Arthur had left a local nightclub around 1 a.m. The last person to see him was the nightclub manager, who observed him walking toward the barracks. Since the distance was quite far, Arthur decided to walk along the road, hoping someone would give him a ride. The manager witnessed him flag down a car and get in after asking for a ride. However, he never arrived at his military unit the next morning, leading to his classification as a deserter. Authorities found a trail hundreds of meters from where Arthur got into the car. After reviewing surveillance footage, they uncovered a lead. The car that picked him up had been parked near the nightclub for hours, with the driver apparently waiting for someone. When Arthur appeared on the road, the driver drove off to give him a ride. This raised suspicions, but they could not identify the make or license plate of the car. This was the only lead in the search for Arthur until his body was eventually discovered in the river. His family firmly rejected the idea that he would have deserted the military, as he was passionate about his work and wanted to pursue a military career. Arthur had no prior legal issues. He was generally a friendly person with no history of running away, mental health disorders, or addictions. He also had no conflicts with anyone. Strangely, the police initially took no action. They didn't even examine Arthur's mobile phone until much later, when the search operation began. It was discovered that he had been near a roundabout at 3 a.m., close to a nightclub. Just 4 minutes later, his phone was found 6 kilometers away, and 5 minutes after that, it was located 11 kilometers from the roundabout. Given the time and distance, it was clear that Arthur had been in the kidnapper's car during this period. This information led investigators to identify the mobile phone of the driver. The phone belonged to Nordahl Lelandais, who was driving an Audi A3 at the time. Unfortunately, the nightclub manager, who saw the car stop, couldn't accurately identify its make. The car was searched, but Nordahl denied any involvement in the kidnapping and appeared arrogant. He seemed to feel uncatchable, a trait often found in serial killers. During interrogation, he spoke confidently, demonstrating impressive powers of persuasion. The detectives who worked with him were taken aback. They had difficulty extracting any information from him. Just a few hours after Arthur disappeared, Nordahl visited a car wash, where he spent over 2 hours cleaning the interior and exterior of his car. His behavior raised suspicions. He was supposedly preparing the car for sale, meticulously removing any stains. Surveillance footage from the car wash showed that he focused particularly on the front passenger seat, spending about half an hour on it. Additionally, he took all the napkins and rags he used for cleaning with him, instead of discarding them in the car wash's trash, which also seemed odd. Nordahl insisted that his actions were normal and justified by his preparations for the car sale. Nordahl has 3 large dogs, which cause hair and dirt to accumulate in the interior of his car. He likely realized that the detectives had no solid evidence against him. allowing him to manipulate the situation to his advantage. During questioning, he remained calm, delivering clear and convincing answers, all while accompanied by his lawyer. Despite his suspicions, the police released him due to lack of evidence, and they continued to investigate further. They later discovered that he was actively posting on social media, sharing content that included videos of himself with illegal substances. He openly claimed to be involved in the sale and use of these banned substances on his profiles. As it turns out, Nordahl Leylandes has a criminal record, having been arrested in 2009 for theft and vandalism. However, he was well liked and described by many as a good person. Friends and acquaintances would never have suspected that he could be a serial killer. He was very good at charming people, which probably helped him gain their trust. Sadly, this ability may have contributed to the disappearance of his 13th victim, Lucy Rue. She had been missing for 5 years before Melis disappeared. At 34, she was receiving treatment for phobias at a local psychiatric clinic. She attended therapy during the day and returned home in the evening. One September morning, she left home without any identification or personal belongings and was never seen again. Like other cases, the investigation into Lucy's disappearance found no leads. It seemed she had vanished without a trace. By the end of 2017, Lucy's sister, Natalie, was already aware of Nordahl. She immediately suspected a link between him and Lucy's disappearance after discovering that Lucy had gone missing in roughly the same area where another victim was later found. Unfortunately, just as in previous cases, law enforcement did not take Lucy's case seriously, possibly because of her mental health issues. Years later, investigators finally tracked down a person who was with Lucy at the psychiatric clinic. They discovered that Nordahl was also there for treatment during that time. The two often shared meals in the cafeteria. A witness said he was particularly attentive to her. She was the 13th victim and was described as a beautiful girl who managed to attract his attention. Soon after, she disappeared without a trace. Police began to notice a pattern as they investigated. It became clear that the missing people were related to the neighborhood where Nordahl lived. The attacks occurred within a 25-kilometer radius of his home. Most of the victims were local residents or tourists visiting nearby areas, and many of them knew each other. Nordahl appeared in several cases, including the disappearance of an elderly woman named Georgette, a person who went missing while walking. He even actively participated in the search, volunteering to help find her. However, there was not enough evidence to charge him. Finally, the detectives began to investigate further. One officer spent hours reviewing footage from the car wash and noticed Nordahl's unusual behavior while cleaning his car. He focused on the trunk of the car, spending 47 minutes there, which aroused suspicion. The car was seized again for a detailed examination. To conduct a thorough analysis, all the interior panels were removed, and investigators spent many hours inspecting the vehicle. They eventually discovered bloodstains on the wiring in the trunk. DNA testing confirmed the blood was Melis's, raising questions about how it got into the car. The time had come to question Nordahl again and confront him with difficult questions. He was detained once more and brought in for interrogation. From the very beginning, he seemed prepared for the interrogation. He displayed confidence and arrogance, but his demeanor changed when asked about the blood in the trunk. Faced with undeniable evidence, he confessed within a few hours. He admitted that he left the wedding with Melis because he promised to show her his dogs. He claimed the incident was accidental. He said she began to cry for no reason, which frustrated him. In his anger, he struck her hard on the head, resulting in her immediate death. Police then conducted a thorough search and reviewed surveillance camera footage. The investigation focused on recordings from 247 cameras located along the street. They saw video footage of the car carrying Nordahl and Melis. In the footage, she appears frightened, pressing against the locked door, trying to get away from Nordahl. Other recordings show him getting out of the car, seemingly lost in thought, while she is motionless and possibly dead. Nordahl eventually agrees to reveal where he hid Melis's body. However, when they arrived at a remote area near an abandoned factory, he began to act confused and pretended to forget where he had buried her. He led the police in circles for nearly an entire day, and by evening, he still had not disclosed the burial site. Eventually, they found her skull and her clothing. At that moment, he suddenly knelt down and cried loudly. However, his expression seemed insincere. However, the investigation by law enforcement was just beginning. They discovered that Nordahl had left the wedding with Melis at 2:46 a.m. and had put his cell phone on airplane mode to avoid being tracked. He was gone for less than an hour, during which he assaulted her, placed her body in the trunk of his car, and drove to an abandoned factory where he buried her. He then returned to the wedding and, at around 4 a.m., pretended to be drunk to create an alibi without arousing suspicion. Detectives noted a significant issue. He had too little time to accomplish everything he needed to do. This leads them to believe that he actually returned to the wedding with Melis's body still in the trunk. After coming back, he seemed anxious that the police might ask him to open the trunk. The discovery of Melis's body, however, did not provide many answers. By that time, it had completely decomposed, and only skeletal remains were found. The forensic expert could not determine the exact cause of death, and the injuries she sustained were impossible to evaluate. The forensic expert noted that she had a broken nose and jaw, but these injuries were not severe enough to cause death. There were no signs of weapon wounds on the bones, leading them to believe that Nordahl may have acted out of anger when she screamed, causing him to lose control. In Arthur's case, Nordahl admitted to killing Arthur on March 29. He said that an argument had broken out in the car, which led to a fight, and Arthur fell out of the car. According to Nordahl, the fall was the cause of death, and he considered it an accident. However, investigators had a different opinion. Although there may have been an argument between them, Nordahl deliberately chose Arthur as his victim. That night he was like a predator. He may have used sleeping pills to control Arthur, but there is not enough evidence to suggest he intended to kill beforehand. This led to the maximum sentence being 30 years instead of life. At the trial, on the prosecution side, a woman named Monique, who had actually escaped from Nordahl, testified. She did not want to contact the police to report him because she feared for her safety. However, she ultimately decided to tell her story to help the prosecution put him away for a long time. According to her, at about 10 a.m., one day in July 2014, she arrived at a store where she saw a stranger in the parking lot. He was sitting in a dark Audi A3 and greeted her. She replied that she was not interested in making new acquaintances and entered the store to make her purchases. Monique realized that the man was constantly following her. He trailed her throughout the store but didn't purchase anything, raising her suspicions. When she left the store and went to another one, he followed her again. After leaving the second store, he still chased her by car, but the distance between them grew further and further. When she reached the police station, she asked for their help, believing that their intervention would save her from a dangerous situation. Unfortunately, the police showed little concern and felt powerless to act because there was no clear evidence of a crime. At home, Monique told her son the story, but it was only when she read about Nordahl in the newspaper that she realized it was him. Numerous articles described his aggressive personality, including instances of domestic violence, stalking, and harassment. During the trial, Melis's parents sought answers about their daughter's fate, ready to hear any truth, and they expected Nordahl to provide a thorough account of the incident. However, he did not provide the truth, as all of his testimony contradicted what had actually happened. Nordahl claimed he was in a panic and experiencing hallucinations, believing that the spirit of Arthur, one of his previous victims, had taken over his body. compelling him to kill Melis. However, his testimony was dismissed as not credible. The prosecution believes that abuse was the main motive behind Melis's kidnapping, claiming that he abused and then killed her. Unfortunately, her body was badly decomposed, making it impossible for investigators to confirm these suspicions. On May 11, 2021, Nordahl Leylandé was convicted of murdering Arthur Neuer and received a 20-year prison sentence. A year later, he was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Melis Araujo, resulting in a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Nordahl chose not to appeal his convictions, and authorities are still investigating his potential involvement in other cases. There are several leads, but direct evidence is scarce, and he has not confessed to any additional crimes. During his time in prison, Nordahl took advantage of every opportunity he had. He discovered that prisoners in French prisons retain most rights, except for release, and he began to exploit these privileges. He corresponded with women, charming them as he usually did, and they came to visit him. Using a secret phone, he communicated with teenagers and accessed adult websites. Overall, he created a comfortable life for himself in prison, complete with a refrigerator, TV, and game console. Despite this, Nordahl confided in other inmates about his plan to escape at the end of the year. The case of Linda Loaiza. Linda Loaiza was born on December 12, 1982, in La Victoria, a city in the state of Mérida, Venezuela. She grew up in a modest family and had 10 siblings. From an early age, she developed a strong interest in animals and often helped her parents with their livestock business. This passion prompted her to enroll in an agricultural engineering school. On February 27, 2001, she moved to Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, to pursue a degree in veterinary medicine. However, no one, including Linda and her family, could have predicted the unexpected turn her life would take. On the morning of March 27, 2001, she was kidnapped by Luis Carrera Almoina. Luis's family was one of the most prominent intellectual and political families in Venezuela. He is the second son of Gustavo Carrera, a renowned researcher, writer, and university professor who was a member of the Venezuelan Language Institute and a former rector of the National Open University. Luis's uncle is a notable intellectual and academic figure in Venezuela. His family is very influential, with many members involved in the Communist Party of Venezuela. Luis's mother, who died in 2000, was also a talented researcher, writer, and professor at the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the Central University of Venezuela. Luis's aunt, along with his sister, had close ties to the government during the Chavez era and were involved in promoting cultural ties linked to socialism. Luis is considered an agricultural engineer and rancher, and he is the son of a school principal from the upper class. However, in reality, he has no stable job or permanent residence. Instead, he relies on his father's financial support and reputation. As a young man, Luis attended a private high school in a wealthy area of eastern Caracas and spent some time living in France. Those who knew him often described him as sociable and self-promoting. On March 27, Luis, then 36, kidnapped 18-year-old Linda at gunpoint. The next morning, Ana Cecilia Lopez noticed that her sister had not returned home. The sisters lived together and were both planning to move to the capital for college. Concerned, Ana reported Linda's disappearance to the police, but they told her it was too early to start looking for her. Shortly thereafter, a stranger called Ana and said her sister would not be returning. When Ana tried to call back, she reached an answering machine. It turned out that Luis, the kidnapper, had made the call. Ana went to the police at least 6 times, but they did not file a complaint or take any action. Instead, they reassured her that Linda and Luis were likely in a romantic relationship and that it was best not to interfere. Occasionally called Anna to reassure her that Linda was fine and studying to pursue a modeling career. However, 2 months after the kidnapping, on May 26, 2001, Anna reported the incident to the police, who began an investigation. The police attempted to contact the owner of the phone number associated with the case and left several messages urging him to voluntarily turn himself in. One morning in March, just weeks after arriving in Caracas, Linda left the building where she lived. She was carrying a thesis and some documents to submit to the Ministry of Education. The building, located at the end of a dead-end street, also contained a small bookstore, a bakery, and a hardware store. As she stepped outside, Luis approached her from behind, threatened her with a weapon, and dragged her into a burgundy-colored van. After putting Linda in the car, he drove to a hotel near the location where she was kidnapped. Linda was terrified immediately after the incident. He was much taller and stronger than she was, looked well-groomed, but acted aggressively and threatened her with a weapon throughout the trip. He warned her that any attempt to resist would result in her death. He arrived at a hotel. Before parking, he repeated that he would kill her if she screamed. He then put the weapon in his jacket pocket. When he checked in, the room he had booked was not ready, and he was told to wait for about an hour. Since the wait was taking too long, he decided to take Linda back to the car and drive to his father's apartment. Before going out into the street, he threatened Linda again. This time, he put his arm around her and walked with her from the parking lot. They passed 2 houses where everyone knew Luis, and he stopped to say hello and chat for a while. He told the women that Linda was his girlfriend. He made up a story that Linda had decided to move in with him, but she cried because she felt guilty about leaving her family. When they arrived at the apartment, he calmed down a bit and started packing various things into a black bag that he had prepared earlier. When he was done packing, they went back to the hotel to check in. After checking into the hotel, Luis quickly inspected the room, looking at the doors, windows, curtains, and bathroom. Meanwhile, Linda noticed a door leading to the next room and considered using it to escape. However, Luis sensed her intentions and asked the hotel staff to change rooms. They were quickly moved to another room. Luis meticulously planned his actions. Inside the room, he made sure the security chains were fastened, the locks were secure, the TV was blaring loudly to drown out Linda's screams, the curtains were drawn tight, and he kept a weapon ready to intimidate her into submission. Linda later described her first night of captivity as terrifying and hopeless. For 112 days, Linda endured severe psychological, verbal, and physical abuse. The ordeal began in a hotel and continued in an apartment in eastern Caracas. Every day, Luis treated Linda like a slave, subjecting her to relentless abuse. On July 19, 2001, Luis left the apartment and forgot to handcuff Linda. She managed to use her remaining strength to reach the window and scream for help. Firefighters finally arrived and climbed onto the balcony to rescue her. When they entered the apartment, they witnessed a heartbreaking scene. The place was covered in trash, and Linda weighed only 32 kilos. Although she was rescued, the memory of that moment still makes her extremely sad. Linda was severely injured, with bruises and broken bones in many places on her body. Her face and mouth were disfigured due to the abuse. Luis forced her to take drugs, gave her very little food, and kept her in poor living conditions. On the day of her rescue, there was a 5-hour delay between the arrival of the fire department and the time she was taken to the doctor. Linda's health was so critical that she could have died at any moment. During her captivity, her life was constantly in danger. After her rescue, she underwent 15 complex surgeries and was hospitalized for more than a year. Shocking photos of her condition appeared on the front pages of newspapers, highlighting the brutality of her situation. The community saw Luis as a monstrous figure and the embodiment of evil. However, Linda's real struggle was only just beginning. After enduring the abuse, she now faced another challenge: Luis's punishment. In an interview, Linda expressed that although her body bore many scars, the deepest pain was in her heart. This trauma is not only hers, but also symbolizes the pain of all women who have suffered abuse from men who have gone unpunished. Linda was probably not Luis's first or last victim. Although she escaped, his life remained unchanged, as the police did not take action against him. Determined to seek justice, Linda chose to pursue a career in law. She earned a law degree and a master's degree in human rights. She repeatedly pointed out that Luis's socioeconomic status had a significant impact on both the investigation and the court's decisions. While Linda was in custody, Luis repeatedly told her that his father's status and connections would protect him from punishment. Her family noted that in Linda's case, basic procedures such as taking photos of the crime scene, collecting evidence, and conducting a forensic examination were not carried out until 8 days later. These essential steps were initially overlooked. There was also the issue of her numerous health problems not being properly documented, along with other important details being omitted. All of this clearly worked against Linda and in favor of Luis. During a trial, Luis underwent a test to determine if he had any psychological or emotional disorders that could explain his behavior and actions. The test showed that Luis did not exhibit any signs of mental illness. In October 2004, Luis was tried for causing serious injury and false imprisonment, with the possibility of attempted murder still being considered. The defense argued that Linda was promiscuous and had consented to most of Luis's actions. The judge then dismissed all charges against Luis Carrera Almoina. Linda felt she had no choice but to appeal to international judges. As a result, her case was heard by over 90 judges and dozens of prosecutors, but justice was still not served. In 2007, Linda appealed to the United States Commission on Human Rights. In the following years, the Commission held approximately 3 hearings related to her case. In 2015, the Commission's chairman allowed Linda to speak for 10 minutes. In her testimony, Linda recounted the horrors she endured at the hands of Luis and how she tried to call for help from those nearby. She also described the moment she was rescued and reflected on her long struggle for justice. Linda's representative urged the United States Commission on Human Rights to thoroughly evaluate the case, highlighting the flaws in the investigation. The Commission recommended that Venezuela conduct a comprehensive and timely investigation into the violence involving Linda, in accordance with the procedures outlined by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Furthermore, the Commission recommended that the state take appropriate disciplinary and criminal action against public officials whose actions or inactions resulted in a failure to deliver justice. The final recommendation was to examine the systems in Venezuela that could prevent a recurrence of past events, focusing on measures to ensure that women victims have access to justice. A national policy to prevent violence against women began to take shape, with effective monitoring and control mechanisms. In 2018, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights condemned the Venezuelan government for numerous human rights violations against Linda and her family. The state has not complied with the U.S. court ruling. Linda has been persistent in her efforts to ensure that regulations protecting women, girls, and adolescents are enforced. She has vowed to continue fighting until the state meets her demands. Linda was kidnapped for 112 days by Luis, a member of a prominent Venezuelan family, who remains at large and unidentified. Linda often emphasizes her age at the time of her kidnapping, as if trying to stress that she was too young to have endured such trauma. Even after more than 20 years, she remains committed to her fight. Linda seeks justice not only for herself, but for all women who have suffered violence. Through her activism, she aims to ensure that no one else has to endure the nightmare she experienced. The case of Suzanne von Richthofen. The von Richthofen family is very wealthy and resides in the suburbs of São Paulo. Their mansion, located in the Brooklyn neighborhood, is valued at around $480,000. The home features multiple living rooms and bedrooms, as well as swimming pools, an office, and a large library. The entrance is defined by large gates, while the entire property is surrounded by a high brick fence. This fence is decorated with unique ornamental stones and plants to ensure privacy. The villa is owned by Manfred von Richthofen, a German engineer and director of Dursa, a large company that oversees highways and roads in the São Paulo area. His wife, Mauricia, is a local psychiatrist. They met while Manfred was studying civil engineering at the University of São Paulo, and they reportedly fell in love at first sight. Mauricia is known for her sociable and friendly demeanor, while Manfred is recognized for his quiet and gentle personality. They married and welcomed their first child, a girl named Suzanne, in 1983. 4 years later, they had a son named Andreas. The two children, Suzanne and Andreas, grew up in a wealthy family and attended the best schools in the city. Suzanne is described as a shy girl and was a dutiful daughter, maintaining a good relationship with her younger brother. Throughout her childhood, she learned 3 languages. After graduating from a German high school, she pursued a law degree at the University of São Paulo. Suzanne aspires to have a successful career, but she doesn't have to worry about finances because her parents are rich. Their family is estimated to be worth around $17 million, and it has been reported that Suzanne's father, Manfred, has around $10.7 million in a Swiss bank account, which is intended to be transferred to her after she graduates. Suzanne had a peaceful childhood and a good education, which may have helped her become a good person. However, her relationship with her parents began to shift. At the age of 18, she began to think more about love than money. In 1999, the family attended an airplane model exhibition. There, Andreas met Daniel Cravinhos, a 19-year-old skilled model builder. Eager to learn, he asked his parents to pay Daniel to teach him how to make models. They agreed, and as Daniel taught him, Daniel caught the attention of Suzanne. They got along well, embodying the idea that opposites attract. Suzanne came from a wealthy, well-educated background, while Daniel had a different upbringing. He grew up in a low-income, dysfunctional family, was expelled from college due to poor grades, and worked part-time with his older brother Christian in a local garage. Suzanne was a young girl who was polite, which made Daniel's rebellious nature seem both unusual and intriguing to her. Unsure of how her parents would react to her relationship with him, she chose to keep it a secret. Eventually, her parents discovered that she was dating Daniel, who had come to teach her younger brother Andreas. Initially, her parents were unconcerned and even allowed their meetings because Daniel presented himself as a law student who enjoyed building model airplanes. However, her parents later discovered that he was not a student and that he smoked marijuana, drank alcohol every day. Like all parents, Manfred and Mauricia wanted the best for their daughter. As hardworking and wealthy individuals, they were unwilling to accept that Suzanne was involved with someone like Daniel. Meanwhile, Andreas, who loved his older sister very much and considered Daniel a good friend, became their ally. He often concealed their meetings while they enjoyed time together in hotels or at Daniel's house. Andreas devised elaborate excuses to protect his older sister Suzanne from their parents, but she eventually invited Daniel to live secretly in their home. They spent the entire month by the pool, singing and experimenting with various illegal drugs. When the parents returned home, they discovered how their daughter, Suzanne, had spent her time while they were away. In the following weeks, the family experienced many arguments and conflicts, which only made Suzanne more determined. One day, she boldly declared that her father, Manfred, should buy an apartment for her and Daniel so they could live together happily. Naturally, her father refused. He told her she could do as she pleased, but only if she used her own money. Manfred also warned her that he would cut off her allowance. However, She then continued her secret meetings with Daniel. In the early morning hours of November 1, 2002, the neighborhood around the Richthofen family home was shaken by screams. Suzanne and Andreas make a horrifying discovery. Their parents, Manfred and Mauricia, have died. Police arrived at the scene and found their bodies in the master bedroom. They were attacked while they slept, and evidence suggests a variety of murder methods. Manfred and Mauricia were so badly injured that they were unrecognizable. Mauricia's neck showed signs of strangulation, and a garbage bag was found over her head. It appeared that the family had been robbed, as money had been taken from a nearby suitcase and from other hiding places in the house. When the officers conducted a thorough inspection of the property, they uncovered several inconsistencies. For example, the alarm system did not alert the guard at that time. Upon further examination, it was revealed that the alarm had been turned off, indicating that the perpetrators likely knew the code. Additionally, the house appeared unusually tidy for a robbery crime scene. The documents and papers were scattered evenly rather than having been hastily thrown around. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry, no electronic equipment was stolen, and some rooms remained completely intact. The circumstances surrounding the case remain unclear, leading to various theories. The media focused particularly on Suzanne and Andreas. In the face of her parents' deaths, Suzanne was surprisingly calm. In interviews with the police, Suzanne and Andreas stated that they were not at home on the evening of October 31, 2002. That day, at 9 p.m., she took Andreas out of the house and went to a cafe without informing their parents. After dropping Andreas off near the cafe, she rented a hotel room and stayed with Daniel. However, by 4 a.m., she and Andreas returned home and discovered their parents murdered in their beds. At this point, investigators became suspicious. Suzanne's testimony contradicted that of her younger brother, Andreas. While Andreas stated that their parents disapproved of her relationship with Daniel, Suzanne claimed that they supported it, which was proven to be false. On November 1, 2002, the funeral for Manfred and Mauricia was held, attended by family, friends, and the media. Unlike her younger brother, Suzanne showed little emotion during the funeral, which raised eyebrows. It was later rumored that she threw a party just 3 days after her parents passed away. Witnesses noted how her demeanor quickly changed from grief at the funeral to laughter at the party, raising the suspicions of authorities. Additionally, an anonymous tip was sent to the police, warning of a purchase made by Daniel's brother, Christian. He bought a Suzuki motorbike for a large sum of cash just days after the murder. This purchase seemed suspicious because both Christian and Daniel were known to be financially struggling and had no stable jobs, along with issues related to alcohol and drugs. Acting on this information, the police took Christian to the station for questioning. Although he initially appears cautious and insists that he is innocent, he eventually confesses to the murders of Manfred and Mauricia. Daniel and Suzanne committed a serious crime. Christian alleges that they conspired to kill Suzanne's parents to inherit $17 million. The police quickly arrested both individuals and began questioning Daniel. He provided details of the crime, but his account was inconsistent with Suzanne's statements. While she said money was not the main motivation, Daniel claimed that inheritance money had a major influence on his decision to engage in crime. Despite their deep love for each other, they broke up shortly after being arrested. Suzanne was arrested, but she was later released pending trial, which was delayed for nearly 4 years. She has spoken with her lawyer and agreed to be interviewed by local media. During the interview, she became emotional, blamed Daniel for the situation, and claimed he ruined her family. She described herself as an unfortunate girl who fell into difficult circumstances and always missed her parents. However, she could not convince others of her innocence. On July 17, 2006, Suzanne, Daniel, and Christian stood trial for first-degree murder. The jury received detailed information about what happened on the night of October 31, 2002. At 9 that night, Andreas left the house with Suzanne while their parents were asleep. At the time, Andreas was only 15 years old and completely innocent. He just wanted to go out and play. However, Suzanne had even more sinister plans. After dropping Andreas off at a coffee shop, she returned home by car with Daniel and Christian. Although the family's security guard saw her, he did not perceive anything unusual. After verifying that her parents were asleep, she turned off her home alarm system. She then guided Daniel and Christian into the living room, where they put on surgical gloves and hoods before taking crowbars upstairs to the designated bedroom. At this point, Daniel and Christian began attacking Suzanne's parents, Mauricia and Manfred. Although it was very painful, they fought back fiercely. To quickly end the attack, Daniel and Christian kill Manfred, but Mauricia is still alive. In a cruel act, they placed a plastic bag over her head and tightened it, leading to her death within minutes. They then staged a robbery by throwing papers around the room and stealing any money they found. They eventually left the house, and to create an alibi, Christian went to a fast food restaurant to ensure he was seen. Meanwhile, Daniel and Suzanne stay at the hotel, later asking for a receipt to prove they were there at 3:30 a.m. At 4 a.m., Suzanne picked up Andreas and returned home, pretending to be shocked upon discovering the horrific scene. During the trial, she blamed Daniel for the incident, claiming he had been drugging her and manipulating her into agreeing to the murder. However, Daniel and Christian argued that they acted on their own desires and Suzanne's plans, stating they were trying to defend a girl with alcoholic parents. However, no evidence of alcohol was found in Suzanne's parents. Additionally, her credibility was questioned, and prosecutor Roberto threatened to label her as a criminal. She was portrayed as an evil blonde, with the conclusion that her true motive was to acquire her parents' hard-earned money and assets. On July 22, 2006, just 5 days after the trial began, Suzanne, Daniel, and Christian were found guilty of murdering Manfred and Mauricia. Suzanne and Daniel received 18-year prison sentences, while Christian was sentenced to 8 years for his involvement in the conspiracy. Suzanne then attempted multiple times to reduce or overturn her sentence. For example, she asked to be released, arguing that her personality disorder contributed to her crime. However, her request was denied. Since then, there have been several tragic incidents. Suzanne's younger brother, Andreas, had a hard time with the loss of his parents. In 2007, 3 neighbors were awakened in the middle of the night to find their home broken into. They caught the burglar, and when the police arrived, he insisted that he had not harmed anyone. He appeared frightened and expressed indifference about his life. This man was Andreas. Shortly after this incident, he was admitted to a specialized institution. The family home was left vacant. In 2014, it was sold to unknown buyers who painted the entire exterior white. Many people sympathize with Andreas. He has a good education and a bright future ahead of him. He was raised by 2 loving parents, but in an instant, everything changed. His sister Suzanne and friend Daniel were imprisoned, and his parents were killed. It's no surprise that he fell into a deep depression. Despite the tragic murder of her parents, Suzanne is likely to inherit their wealth after serving her prison sentence. With a 40-year sentence, she could be released by 2042 and become a multimillionaire. Currently, both Suzanne and Daniel are serving their sentences in a semi-open facility, which allows them to leave prison for special occasions. It seems that in Brazil, even those convicted of murder can take vacations. The case of Lauren Giddings. Lauren Teresa Giddings was born on April 18, 1984 in Tacoma Park, Maryland. She grew up with her 2 older sisters, Sarah and Caitlin. Her parents, Karen and William, maintained a warm and friendly atmosphere in the family. From a young age, she was always studious and religious. She was a member of St. Mary's Catholic Church and attended church from kindergarten through 8th grade. In 2002, at the age of 18, Lauren graduated from high school. That same year, she went to Georgia to attend an academy, where she studied until 2006. After leaving the academy, she returned home and worked at the National Public Policy Center in Washington. In 2008, she returned to Georgia to study law at Mercer University. Lauren was a blue-eyed blonde with an athletic build who loved nature and animals, especially her pet dog, a Pekingese. Her relatives described her as a kind person who respected others' opinions. Sarah later noted that during college, Lauren transformed from a shy person into an active young woman with many friends. She was the pride of her family, and they had high hopes for her. However, her move to Georgia set off a series of unfortunate incidents that led to a tragic end. Mercer University is located in Macon, a city in central Georgia, right across from Lauren's dorm. Most of the people living in the dormitories are university students, and they usually know each other. Among them was Stephen Mark McDaniel, who lived near Lauren's room and was also in law school. Both are members of the Federalist Society, an organization of some 60,000 lawyers, both those studying and those already practicing. Lauren served as president of the society, while Stephen served as vice president. This was their only relationship. Stephen was known to be quiet. He was not very social and rarely drank. Lauren, on the other hand, was very attractive, had many interests, and maintained a busy schedule. Before they met at university, Stephen and Lauren had very different lives. Stephen was born on September 9, 1985, in Atlanta, Georgia. His parents, Glenda and William, worked in a factory. He was a bright child who valued cleanliness and organization. Until he was 13, he sang in the church choir in his hometown. Stephen aspired to write a novel, pursue a career in criminal law, and ultimately become a federal judge. After completing high school, he enrolled in law school in 2008, where he met Lauren. He had worked up the courage to ask her out a few times, but Lauren had kindly declined, explaining that she was dating David, a lawyer from Atlanta, who was 20 years her senior. They started dating in 2007, before she went to college, when she interned at the law firm where he worked. After she moved to Georgia, David followed her, and their relationship continued. To discourage Stephen from pursuing her, Lauren mentioned that she and David planned to leave the city after graduation and live together. On May 11, 2011, Lauren fulfilled one of her biggest dreams, graduating with a Juris Doctorate. Her next goal was to obtain a license to practice as a lawyer, which required passing a challenging exam. As she prepared for the exam, everything went smoothly, and she felt confident about her future. However, she knew she would soon need to leave the city. Stephen silently accepted this fact. On the surface, he appeared calm, but in his mind he had other plans. In June, Caitlin got married in Maryland, and Lauren attended the wedding. Soon after, she returned to her dormitory in Georgia to focus on studying for her upcoming exams. On the evening of June 25, David received an email from Lauren. In the email, she mentioned feeling uneasy and sensing that something strange was happening in her house. That reminded her of a similar experience she had over a year ago. At the time, she told her sister Caitlin that she suspected someone had broken into her home and gone through her belongings. At this point, Lauren's family and friends knew she was busy studying for exams, so they weren't worried when she stopped communicating. The last time anyone saw her was on Saturday, June 25, 2011, at a store. Caitlin sent her a few messages, but didn't think much about the lack of response. Caitlin believed she was too busy to respond. It wasn't until Wednesday evening, June 29, that David and her relatives began to worry because she had been silent for so long. David called Caitlin to ask if she had heard from Lauren, which worried her, as she had also tried to contact Lauren to no avail. She then contacted some of Lauren's friends, but no one had any information. Ashley, a friend of Lauren's, went to knock on her room, but no one answered, and it was quiet inside. Curious, she looked for Lauren's car and found it missing. The 2004 Mitsubishi was usually parked where Lauren always left it. Ashley remembered that Lauren had shown her where the spare key was in case of an emergency, so she used it to get into the apartment. Everything was in order. Lauren's personal belongings, phone, wallet, passport, and computer were in their usual places. Only Lauren was missing. While everyone was frantically searching for Lauren and trying to find clues about her whereabouts, Stephen entered the apartment. He stayed for a while to observe and chat with a few people before leaving. Ashley then discovered that Lauren's phone was dead, so she plugged it in to charge. Once the phone turned on, she checked it and saw that the last calls were made on June 25, 4 days earlier. Realizing it was time to involve the authorities, she called 911. A few minutes later, police officers from Mercer University arrived and relayed the information to the Macon police. After midnight, police officers, along with Lauren's friends and neighbors, began searching for her. At 3 a.m., after a thorough check of the dormitory area, the police left without any news about Lauren. Caitlin became worried and decided to inform her parents. Her father quickly got in the car and drove to Macon to file a missing person report. After her father filed the report, the detectives began their investigation. They drove to the dormitory where Lauren lived but couldn't find a parking space, so they parked in front of a dumpster. When investigators entered Lauren's room, they used luminol, a chemical that can detect blood, to conduct a test. They sprayed luminol on the walls, floors, and some objects in Lauren's living room, kitchen, and bedroom. However, things took a turn for the worse when they entered the bathroom and found the floor reacting violently to the luminol. At this point, everyone realized this was a crime scene and that something terrible had happened to Lauren. Meanwhile, friends and family continued to search for her. When interviewing Stephen, he described Lauren as a good and honest person, but admitted that he did not know where she was. According to Stephen, she had gone jogging and was attacked by a criminal. At the time he was sharing this, a garbage truck arrived. However, they were unable to collect the trash because a police car had parked in the wrong place and blocked the entrance to the trash bin. This was a pivotal moment that helped investigators quickly uncover the truth about what had happened to Lauren. Several detectives, having found nothing in Lauren's apartment and returning to their car, suddenly sensed a foul odor. It was the smell of death. They traced the odor to the garbage containers and began to investigate them. Inside one black plastic bag, they discovered a decomposing human torso. After examining it, the detectives concluded that it was likely the remains of a female, probably belonging to Lauren. While Stephen was talking to a reporter, a press officer interrupted to announce that the police had just discovered a body in a trash can behind the house. Initially confused and silent for a few seconds, Stephen then asked again about the body. He stammered that he needed to sit down, turned away from the camera, walked a short distance, and sat down near some bushes. Throughout this, the media operator captured his reactions. He appeared pale and was visibly shaking. Then, on the night of June 30, Stephen voluntarily went to the police station to provide a statement. The questioning lasted for 12 long hours. When asked about Lauren, he said he always noticed when she left or entered the dormitory. Even though he did not speak to her directly, he could hear or see her passing by his window. Furthermore, he claimed that he was always aware of all the activities in the dormitory. After being questioned, Stephen allowed the police to search his home, including his bedroom, where they discovered a rope, several weapons, blood-stained blue gloves, a master key to open the apartment door, and a pair of women's underwear. The investigators also seized Stephen's car, where they found more bloodstains. They found his computer, which contained conversations on a blog under the alias Sun. In this blog, he wrote about women and violence. In another post, Stephen discussed a situation that seemed to involve Lauren, He mentioned that he had been consumed by thoughts of one person for a long time, someone he wanted to protect from harm. If given the chance, he would have fought against anything that could hurt her without hesitation, but his mental struggles prevented him from doing so. He couldn't even confess his feelings to her, leaving him to watch her from afar. On Stephen's computer, many compromising photos were discovered, including pictures of Lauren. Additionally, a hacksaw with bloodstains was found in the tool cabinet, suggesting that a disturbing situation had occurred. Detectives concluded that Stephen had committed a heinous crime against Lauren. The evidence collected was sufficient to officially arrest Stephen McDaniel on July 2, 2011. On July 6, DNA tests showed that body parts found in a trash can belonged to Lauren. In August 2011, Stephen was charged with murder. Police thoroughly searched the dormitory and surrounding areas for other body parts, but found nothing more. Despite overwhelming evidence, he maintained his innocence during the early stages of his detention. After examining the contents of Stephen's computer, investigators discovered that he had been monitoring Lauren's accounts and social media. In addition to the murder charge, on August 23, 2011, Stephen was charged with 7 more counts and was ordered to post bail of $850,000, a huge amount of money for him and his family. In February 2013, the prosecutor's office announced that they would not seek the death penalty, at the request of Lauren's family. In 2014, just a week before his trial, Stephen surprised everyone by pleading guilty. The decision to plead guilty was part of a deal with prosecutors in which he agreed to accept responsibility for Lauren's death in exchange for dropping several other charges against him. Nearly 3 years after her murder, he recounted what really happened. Stephen said that on the morning of June 26, 2011, he entered Lauren's apartment while she was sleeping. He sat on her bed to watch her. When she woke up and saw him, she tried to stay calm and pleaded with him not to hurt her. Instead of leaving, he grabbed Lauren by the neck and squeezed tightly. She fought back desperately to escape. They both fell to the floor, and her legs got trapped under the bed, which worked to Stephen's advantage since she couldn't kick him. However, she managed to hit him with her hands and pulled off his mask. Fear engulfed her when she realized the attacker was her neighbor, Stephen, a fellow law student and vice president of the same organization she led. Once a shy and reserved guy who had asked her out, he had transformed into a terrifying figure. He violently grabbed her by the neck in an attempt to strangle her. Despite Lauren's desperate pleas for him to stop, he ignored her cries and continued to tighten his grip for several minutes. When she fell still, he released her at 4:30. Stephen then dragged Lauren's body into the bathroom, placed her in the bathtub, and returned to his apartment. There, he spent the day on his computer. He eventually returned to Lauren's apartment with a hacksaw. Without hesitation, he began wrapping the body parts in black bags and throwing them into various trash cans around the dormitory. He kept her torso for 2 more days before dumping it in a container outside the building, where police later discovered it. Stephen reported that within 48 hours of the crime, he had disposed of the mask and shirt stained with Lauren's blood. When questioned about the motive for the murder, he confessed to being obsessed with Lauren since they met. He revealed that he had been spying on her for months, using a setup to observe her without her noticing. Stephen also admitted that he had carefully researched methods to avoid detection. Thanks to this, he was able to use the master key he had stolen from the dormitory manager to enter Lauren's room. She was about to become a lawyer, something she had always dreamed of throughout her life. However, she had no idea that Stephen, who had been secretly watching her, would completely transform her life. After a trial in 2014, Stephen Mark McDaniel was convicted of a violent crime and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole. After receiving the verdict, he began to do everything he could to regain his freedom. Despite admitting guilt, He maintained that he did not abuse Lauren. Stephen also shared with investigators his irrational belief that Lauren was still alive. He claimed to have a split personality, which he said made it difficult for him to explain his actions, yet he continued to follow his daily routine. He expressed feelings of remorse and stated that he missed Lauren greatly, but he understood that he could not expect forgiveness from her family. In 2018, Stephen's father set up an online fundraising page to hire a lawyer for his son's defense. However, the campaign was met with strong opposition from Lauren's family and friends, leading to its immediate cancellation. As a result, Stephen was forced to represent himself at the hearing. He argued that his rights were violated in the original sentence. Additionally, he criticized his previous lawyers for not defending him adequately, but his request for a review was denied. He subsequently appealed to the Supreme Court of Georgia and then to the Supreme Court of the United States, but both appeals were rejected. In January 2022, as well as in May and December of that year, he attempted to have his trial reviewed, but was unsuccessful. In January 2023, nearly 9 years after pleading guilty, he filed another appeal seeking to reduce his parole eligibility period. This time, he submitted a petition to the federal district court. But, as before, his appeal was denied. Stephen's mother struggled to accept the painful reality of her son's involvement in the murder. His grandfather expressed deep sadness, reflecting on the 25 years during which he had been proud of his grandson, but now found it hard to recognize him. During a visit to the facility where Stephen was held, the grandfather felt as if he were seeing a different person. Overwhelmed with despair, he left and chose not to visit Stephen again. Lauren's relatives found some comfort in the belief that Stephen would eventually realize the significance of his actions during his time in prison, which might lead to his repentance. Caitlin, her sister, honored Lauren by naming one of her daughters after her. The family continues to celebrate Lauren's birthday and maintains a tradition of wearing pink clothes on Wednesdays, just as Lauren had during her life. Lauren's tragic fate is a reminder of the importance of staying vigilant when sensing danger. In Lauren's case, the threat was not only visible, but also close at hand, as she fell victim to someone who appeared harmless. This incident not only destroyed her dreams, but also broke the hearts of her loved ones. The case of Christina Woods. Christina was born on August 19, 1989 in South Bend, Indiana, USA. Her mother, Mary, was only 18 years old when she gave birth to her. Christina was the first child in the family, and later had 2 younger sisters and 2 younger brothers, forming a large family. From a young age, she dreamed of an ideal married life and having many children. However, during her elementary school years, family problems began to arise, ultimately leading to her father's departure. Christina wanted to avoid the mistakes of her parents and build a complete family, but during her school years, she realized the difficulties and realities of adult life. Christina then met an older man and became pregnant, even though she was very young. She decided to keep the baby, and when she was 16 years old, she gave birth. Unfortunately, the father of the baby was a terrible parent because he abandoned her and the baby. Her mother's life was similar. Her father also abandoned the family. Witnessing her mother's struggles and sacrifices made Christina realize how challenging her own situation would be. Despite facing challenges, Christina was determined to be a good mother, and her relatives believed she succeeded, especially considering her young age. At 17 years old, she met Troy, a 30-year-old man who worked at a store near her home. Although she had always liked older men, the age difference made Troy seem very mature. Despite her mother's warnings about the age gap, they connected and began dating. Their relationship deepened, and they married on November 14, 2007, when Christina turned 18. A year later, she became pregnant again. Tragically, on April 21, 2009, Christina experienced her first heartbreak when her daughter, Lillian, passed away due to health complications. During this difficult time, she sought comfort from Troy, but found it hard to connect with him. He was emotionally distant and held conservative views. Ultimately, Christina had 4 children in total: Haley, Sierra, Kira, and Anthony. Friends and family describe her as friendly and cheerful. In contrast, her husband Troy wanted to control every aspect of their lives. He expected Christina to stay at home and manage household chores, but as a young woman, she was not ready for that. She wanted to enjoy life, spend time with friends, attend parties, and escape from constant control. Troy tried to force her into a routine but failed, which frustrated him and led to many arguments. He often lashed out at her, humiliating her over minor issues. One night, during an unexpected conflict, he assaulted her for the first time. Unable to endure the abuse, she reported him to the police. When officers arrived, Troy tried to blame her for the situation, but his excuses fell flat. She had visible injuries, which led to his arrest. Christina decided to break up with Troy, but this choice caused more controversy. After his release from jail, his behavior became erratic. He stalked her and issued threats whenever they crossed paths in public. To protect herself, she sought a restraining order against him. Despite this, he repeatedly violated the order and faced multiple arrests, but he did not face any serious consequences for his actions. In the fall of 2017, Christina was diagnosed with cancer. Fortunately, the disease was caught early enough that surgery could have saved her. However, after the surgery, she had to rest in bed. During this time, Troy began to show renewed interest in Christina. He wants to reconcile and live as a family again, but she makes it clear that she only sees him as the father of her children. She wanted him to bond with the kids, but didn't want to rekindle their relationship. While recovering from surgery at home, Christina received frequent visits from family and friends, especially her mother and her 2 best friends, Gina and Brooke. Brooke often came over with her husband, Daniel Lynn. She and Brooke were childhood friends, growing up together and being as close as family. One evening, Christina's mother, Mary, came to look after her daughter and planned to stay overnight. To her surprise, she found Daniel there. Initially, she thought nothing of it. However, as the night went on, his behavior became increasingly odd. First, Brooke wasn't there. Second, Daniel didn't leave even after Mary offered to take care of Christina and told him he could go home. He ended up staying all night, proving that this was more than just a casual visit. The next morning, Mary ran into Brooke, who expressed concern about Daniel's behavior. Mary asked why he visited Christina when she was away and why he stayed overnight. She was surprised and had no answer, as she had no idea what was going on. She was devastated when she discovered that her husband, Daniel, had been having an affair with her best friend Christina for a long time. Feeling betrayed and unhappy, she went straight to confront Christina. She felt deceived not only by her husband, but also by someone she considered a close friend, someone she had grown up with. When Brooke confronted Christina, a heated argument ensued. Christina admitted that for the past 10 years, she and Brooke's husband Daniel had been secretly involved while pretending to be just friends. They had been enjoying their affair without any intention of ending it. This revelation infuriated Brooke. Meanwhile, Christina's ex-husband Troy learned about the situation. He realized that their marriage had been built on betrayal, as Christina had also cheated on him. Seizing the opportunity, he decided to fight for full custody of their children, claiming he was concerned for their well-being due to Christina's irresponsible behavior. However, Her family and friends believed that Troy's real purpose in seeking custody was to hurt her as much as possible. Despite this, Daniel's relationships with both Brooke and Christina continued, creating a complicated love triangle. Daniel alternated between living with Brooke and Christina, often choosing one woman while arguing with the other. Both women were aware of this situation but chose to tolerate it, and neither was willing to end the cycle. This led to tensions between them, resulting in constant arguments and even physical fights. In May 2018, Daniel spent time with Christina again. She urged him to leave Brooke for her, but this discussion was starting to frustrate him. Their conversation turned into another argument, which escalated into violence, leaving Christina injured and hospitalized. Despite this incident, she did not end her relationship with Daniel, seemingly holding on to hope for a future with him, even though he was married to her friend Brooke. During this time, Christina was in regular contact with her ex-husband Troy, who was determined to gain full custody of their children. Their relationship seemed to improve, but he remained focused on gaining more custody of the children. She felt relieved to have the chance to take her mind off the complications of her love life and spend quality time with her children. On June 9, 2018, Christina attended a job interview in hopes of finding a job and improving her financial situation. Although she still relied on Troy and her family for support, she understood that this reliance couldn't last forever. It was crucial for her to regain her independence and achieve career success to ensure a stable future for herself and her children. After the interview, Christina called her mother, Mary, to share the good news that she had passed the interview and got the job. While driving, she mentioned that she would call her mother again once she got home. She wanted to discuss plans for a celebration with her mother and sister. The drive would take her about 15 to 20 minutes. Her mother was thrilled and eagerly awaited the call. However, an hour passed, and Christina still hadn't called, which made her mother anxious. She tried to distract herself with work, but she felt uneasy, as this was unlike Christina. Mary decided to call Christina, but she didn't answer. Mary then sent text messages and tried to contact her daughter through various messaging apps, but she did not respond. Throughout the day, she tried to contact her daughter. By evening, she felt compelled to contact the police. Unfortunately, they informed her that not enough time had passed to consider Christina a missing person. Because she was an adult, she had the right to leave without reporting it. The police advised her to wait another day. Mary then went to Christina's house to check, but found no sign of her or the children. It seems she hasn't come home yet, and the kids are with their father, Troy. This situation made Mary more worried, but she decided to wait until the next day, hoping that things would become clearer. The following day, Mary still couldn't reach her daughter and decided to contact the police to report her missing. This time, the police took her report seriously without hesitation. The situation was becoming very serious because Christina was a responsible mother with 4 children. She was expected to keep in touch with and care for her children. The strangest thing was that a court hearing was scheduled for June 12, 2018, where custody between Christina and Troy would be decided. However, she did not appear at the hearing, and Troy had to go to court alone. On that same day, Christina's stepfather received a strange message from her. She mentioned having problems and needing help, asking him to come get her. However, 2 hours later, her stepfather received another message from her, saying she was okay and instructing him not to tell her mother, Mary. At that moment, her relatives were finally convinced that something bad had happened to her. During this time, the police were actively searching for Christina, hoping she would show up in court. However, suspicions grew that she was a victim of a crime, as no traces of her could be found. The police began to investigate the complex details of her life and relationships. From the beginning, her ex-husband Troy was the prime suspect, as they often had conflicts. They were in a serious custody dispute, giving him a strong motive to harm her. Despite this, Troy was one of the few who cooperated with the investigation. Meanwhile, neither Brooke nor Daniel was interested in finding Christina, which made people suspicious of them. Eventually, it was established that Troy was not involved. He had an alibi, confirmed by several witnesses at the time of Christina's disappearance. He had been with the children and appeared genuinely worried about Christina's situation. Despite their disagreements, Troy did not want the children to grow up without their mother. He was more focused on gaining full custody because Christina's life was chaotic, and he wanted to protect the children from that instability. The second suspect is Daniel Lynn, Brooke's husband. Daniel owned a house in St. Louis County, Minnesota. Investigators analyzed Christina's phone data and discovered that this house was the last place she had visited. It is worth noting that the house had been abandoned for 5 years, and Daniel rarely maintained it. Detectives then went to investigate the area for any sign of Christina. At first, the house seemed normal, befitting its abandoned state. Despite the house being vacant for years, there was a strong scent of cleaning products wafting in from a slightly open window, suggesting recent use. On the kitchen table, they found gloves commonly used for cleaning. Neighbors reported unusual activity around the house, stating that several cars had been parked there from June 11 to June 15. Investigators later also looked at Daniel's recent bank transactions. They found that shortly before Christina went missing, he bought a significant amount of cleaning products and protective gear similar to what was found in the house at a local hardware store. They asked to see the video from the surveillance camera. On that day, Daniel was not shopping alone. Brooke was with him, and both appeared tense. The store clerk who assisted them confirmed this. He noticed Daniel trying to contain his anxiety, with a distracted look in his eyes, while Brooke looked very uneasy. Shortly after, the detectives noticed a large fire pit on Daniel's land, where they discovered several items that had been partially burned by the fire. Among these were fragments of a mobile phone, a bracelet, a button from a pair of jeans, and several other melted items that had an inscription from an amusement park. This was the same park where Christina had spent time with Troy and the children shortly before she went missing. Troy confirmed that all of these items could have been burned. This coincidence cannot be just a coincidence, however. The information needs to be verified. On July 2, 2018, 24 days after Christina went missing, the police conducted a thorough search of the area around Daniel's house. They searched nearly every inch of the area and then discovered a fresh grave. As they dug deeper, they found Christina's body. After conducting an autopsy, experts confirmed that she had been beaten for an extended period and had suffered severe injuries. However, the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Subsequently, detectives sought an arrest warrant for 40-year-old Daniel Lynn. However, he was not planning to surrender and went into hiding, leaving no clues about his location. Meanwhile, the police tried to locate Brooke and discovered that she had also disappeared. That evening, an anonymous witness contacted the police and reported that Daniel had gone to a trailer park several hundred miles from his home. The witness also indicated that Daniel had likely harmed Christina, as he had confessed to doing so. When the police arrived at the trailer park, Daniel and Brooke had disappeared again. Local residents confirmed that they had been there and pointed out the trailer they used. Detectives later found a receipt from a gas station a few miles away in a trash bin. CCTV footage showed them entering the store together, holding hands. This clearly indicated that Brooke was not a victim of kidnapping. She had been with Daniel willingly. On July 3, 2018, Brooke suddenly appeared and was immediately arrested and taken to the police station. She reported that Daniel had called her earlier that day, the day Christina went missing. He asked her to bring tools and some items from their home, saying that their family farm was flooded and needed repairs. When Brooke brought the items to him, she found Christina there. Brooke admitted that Christina and Daniel had argued, which led to a fight. She said that she just stood by and watched without trying to intervene. In a fit of rage, he hit Christina so hard that she fell and lost consciousness. He then took Brooke outside and returned to the house with a shovel. Brooke went to the car and waited for him to return. When Daniel finally came back, he appeared out of breath and covered in dirt. Brooke maintains that she had nothing to do with Christina's death, but believes that Daniel killed and buried Christina on their land. However, she could not specify the exact location, claiming she did not witness the events. Brooke mentioned that she had not seen Daniel since that day and was unaware of his current whereabouts. The detectives did not inform her that Christina's body had already been discovered. Instead, they hoped to catch her in a lie or find inconsistencies in her story, but there were very few. After that, they sent her home, but asked her to contact the police if she learned anything new about Christina. However, they began to closely monitor her movements and noticed that she frequently visited a trailer park where her parents owned a small house. Although Brooke had previously claimed she didn't know Daniel's whereabouts, surveillance footage showed them together at a gas station, suggesting they had run away together. It's possible they later separated. The detectives decided to verify her story when she returned to the trailer park. Brooke was already there when they arrived. They entered the trailer and found Daniel inside. Both immediately refused to answer questions and requested a lawyer. There was no resistance, and they were subsequently arrested. Many questions arose regarding Brooke's possible involvement in the murder. While Daniel's DNA was found on Christina's body, this does not necessarily mean he acted alone. His wife, Brooke, may also have played a role in attacking Christina, disposing of the body, and cleaning up the crime scene to the point of leaving no evidence. According to Brooke, Daniel and Christina's relationship was complicated, and he often treated her badly. Despite this, Christina forgave him repeatedly due to her strong feelings for him. She often expressed that she felt like part of his family and was reluctant to end their relationship. Christina believes that once she becomes financially independent, she can work through her issues with Troy and improve her relationship with Daniel. Unfortunately, her hopes never came true, eventually leading to her tragic murder. Daniel and Brooke were questioned. Brooke claimed that Christina had provoked the aggression, as she always did, which made it difficult for Daniel to control himself. However, he refused to cooperate with the investigation. His lawyer argued that the prosecutor's office lacked sufficient evidence to press charges, but this was incorrect. Daniel Lynn was held on a $1 million bail, which he was unable to pay, forcing him to remain in jail. To avoid severe punishment, he agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. He confessed to second-degree murder, which carries a maximum sentence of 40 years. As a result of the plea deal, he received a 16-year prison term. Brooke pleaded guilty to assisting Daniel, which allowed her to avoid a jury trial. Christina's mother and those who cared about her were shocked to learn that Brooke was sentenced to only 1 year in prison. Brooke admitted to witnessing the abuse of her best friend Christina without intervening. However, the prosecutor's office could not find enough evidence to charge her with a crime. After serving her sentence, Brooke continued her relationship with Daniel. Christina's family was outraged. Even her ex-husband, Troy, criticized the leniency of the sentence, but they were unable to have the court's decision overturned. They had to accept the outcome. Although Christina lost custody of her 4 children, her eldest daughter, Haley, who was 15 at the time, was allowed to live with her maternal grandmother, while the other 3 children went to live with their father. In an interview after the trial, Christina's mother expressed her desire for her daughter to be remembered not as a victim of crime or violence, but as a loving mother, daughter, and sister. She tried to persuade the court to reconsider the case and increase the sentence, but her efforts were unsuccessful. The case of Mark Orrin Barton. Mark Orrin Barton was born in April 1955. He was the son of a soldier and lived in many different places throughout his childhood, as his parents moved from China to various states. Later, his family moved to South Carolina. During this time, his parents' marriage began to have problems. Eventually, his mother filed for divorce and raised him on her own, but he maintained contact with his father. From a young age, Mark was a reserved person and found it difficult to connect with other children. Perhaps it was this loneliness, or the curiosity of adolescence, that led him to experiment with illegal substances, resulting in unwanted consequences. Mark quickly became addicted to hallucinogens and was caught stealing from pharmacies multiple times, but he did not face severe consequences. Nevertheless, these issues did not prevent Mark from going to college. He attended Clemson University and earned a degree in chemistry. Despite this, he struggled with his addiction throughout. After completing his education, Mark was arrested for theft again while trying to obtain money for drugs. This incident occurred just a month after he received his diploma, allowing him to avoid any academic repercussions. Had he still been in school, he likely would have been expelled. However, fate seemed to favor him many times as he escaped serious consequences for his mistakes and wrongdoings. This all took place during the psychedelic boom of the 1960s in the United States, a time when many people experimented with drugs, including Mark. Mark then decided to experiment on his own to create illegal substances, based on his knowledge of chemistry and passion. As a result, he encountered several overdoses during the experimentation process, leading to hospitalizations. In those cases, he was always saved, and many believed that he had 2 personalities, one being an excellent chemistry graduate student, and the other being a man struggling with addiction and psychological problems. By the age of 29, Mark had extensive knowledge of science but continued to face the challenges of drug addiction, which caused hallucinations. During this time, he moved to Georgia, where he met his future wife, Deborah Spivey. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they soon got married. Mark found a job, but when he became a co-founder of a chemical production company, his employer required him to relocate to Alabama. Unfortunately, due to various issues, he lost that job shortly afterward. During this period, his mental health began to decline rapidly. Deborah noticed increasing signs of paranoia and witnessed his emotional outbursts. He became convinced that people wanted to harm him and often acted nervously and strangely, believing he was being followed and monitored. Despite these challenges, Deborah loved Mark and wanted to help him. They had 2 children together, Matthew and Michelle. However, as Mark's mental health continued to deteriorate, the atmosphere in their home shifted. He began to display more manipulative and controlling behavior, particularly towards Deborah. This situation quickly escalated, and Deborah started to feel unsafe for herself and their children. She frequently expressed her concerns to friends and family, mentioning that Mark's unsettling gaze frightened her. During this difficult time, Mark was fired from his job because his team complained about his inappropriate behavior. The day after Mark was let go, a curious incident occurred. Someone hacked into the company's computers, deleted data, and stole information. Mark denied any involvement, but the investigation soon connected him to the crime, proving that he was the hacker. He was arrested, but surprisingly, the company decided to drop most of the charges against him. resulting in his release after a brief period of imprisonment. It was later discovered that Mark had manufactured and sold several illegal chemicals while co-founding the company. To protect his reputation, the company allowed Mark to leave without being prosecuted. There were no records of his criminal activities, as the employers reported to the police that their dispute had ended peacefully. The scandal started when their family moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Mark quickly found a prestigious job at a manufacturing company, known for its chemical production. During this time, he also became a sales representative for chemicals at another organization. Deborah shared with her loved ones that Mark's condition had significantly improved. She felt positive about their marriage and believed their relationship could be salvaged. This was important to her because if they divorced, their children would be hurt. During this time, Mark became more relaxed and appeared to have stopped using drugs. However, there were simpler reasons for this change. While working, he meets a 20-year-old girl named Leigh Ann, who has just started working as a secretary at the company where he works. They hit it off and soon began flirting, dating each other. Mark fell deeply in love with her, and their affair lasted for quite a while. By 1993, it seemed like Mark had no problems at all. He looks great, is active, makes a lot of money, doesn't do drugs, has a loving wife, beautiful children, and even a mistress. Everything appeared calm until Deborah started to suspect him of cheating. Initially, Deborah tried to reassure herself, thinking that Mark was simply experiencing a midlife crisis. He had indeed started taking better care of himself and looked younger. However, suspicions about him having an affair began to emerge. He insisted he had no affairs and was only trying to maintain his youthful appearance. At the beginning of 1993, he purchased a life insurance policy for Deborah worth $600,000. It was later discovered that he had tried to buy a contract for over $1 million, but he did not have enough money to pay for it. In June 1993, Mark and his lover Leigh went on a trip together. Mark tried to convince his wife, Deborah, that it was just a business trip to a nearby state. During this time, he confessed his love to Leigh and expressed his desire to leave Deborah for her. Leigh agreed to the relationship, but insisted that he must first get a divorce. However, Deborah did not agree to a divorce immediately. She threatened to initiate a lengthy divorce process, which could take a year or more due to the complex issues involved. At the time, Mark and Deborah were working with a family law attorney, and as expected, the process was lengthy as parenting plans needed to be drawn up and child support issues resolved. In early September 1993, Deborah planned a weekend vacation to the lake with her mother and family. Those around her knew about the problems in her marriage to Mark, but believed they were trying to work through their issues. Everything seemed normal. Deborah invited her husband Mark to join them and wanted to take their children along, but their daughter got sick. Their son Matthew, a Boy Scout, had an important camping trip that weekend. Mark told Deborah he needed to stay home with the kids and suggested she go to the lake with her mother, which she agreed to do. Deborah remained determined to carry out her plans and headed to the lake, where her mother, Eloise, was supposed to meet her. The last time anyone saw them together was on the evening of September 4, 1993. Everything seemed peaceful and normal. However, on Monday, September 6th, they did not return home as expected. Deborah's father tried to contact both his daughter and wife, but they did not respond to his calls. Mark also claimed he had no information about their whereabouts. Consequently, Deborah's father went to the police to request a welfare check and provided the address of their lake house. The police arrived at the lake house, but when they knocked on the door, no one answered. After a few minutes, they walked around the area but saw nothing suspicious other than cars parked in the driveway. It appeared that Eloise and Deborah were still nearby, but there was no sign of them. Officers then discovered an unlocked trailer on the property and decided to investigate further. Inside, they encountered a gruesome scene. Deborah and Eloise had been murdered. There were signs of a struggle and a search for valuables, but nothing was taken except for Deborah's wedding ring. The suspect appeared to have left other valuables behind, such as a weapon left on the kitchen counter and several $100s in cash that Deborah had in her pocket. There was no sign of forced entry, indicating the possibility that Deborah and Eloise knew their attacker. It seemed they might have been careless and failed to lock the trailer, allowing the intruder access. Mark quickly became the prime suspect. He was financially motivated. It was the insurance money, and he was obviously stressed about the issues that were coming up regarding divorce, child support, and custody. Deborah is likely to gain the upper hand in their legal battle, making her removal beneficial to him. He could have seized the chance to kill her in a secluded area without any witnesses. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the vicinity. After the funeral, the police searched Mark's house but found nothing. They were also interested in his car, where they discovered several drops of blood on the steering wheel and ignition switch. Mark claimed the blood was from a recent cut on his finger. Unfortunately, the blood samples could not be analyzed because they were contaminated with soda, making it impossible to determine whether the blood belonged to Deborah and Eloise. As a result, the police released Mark after questioning. Several witnesses who went camping with Mark and his son Matthew said he left for a few hours and may have committed the crime. This meant he did not have a solid alibi. Despite this, the case was eventually closed. Deborah's relatives were devastated that her children, Michelle and Matthew, were left without their mother and that the perpetrator was never caught. The detectives quickly gave up on the investigation after the double murder. A week after Mark returns home, his mistress, Lee, moves in with him. She begins to act like a mother, even trying to replace the children's biological mother, Deborah. After the case was closed, Mark received a payment from Deborah's life insurance policy, but it was only half of the total amount, $294,000. Dissatisfied with the payment, he sued the insurance company, which increased the payout to $450,000. From this amount, $150,000 was allocated to a trust fund for their children. At this time, Mark openly expressed his feelings for Lee, declaring that he had never loved anyone so much. It was no surprise when they quickly got married. With the money from the insurance, Mark decided to quit his job to pursue a new business venture, becoming a trader at a brokerage firm. However, after Deborah's death, Mark's emotional state deteriorated. The profitable trading opportunities he once saw turned into multiple losses due to his numerous mistakes. Lacking financial knowledge and experience, he continued to place large bets, leading to further losses. By June 1999, Mark had not only lost his entire fortune, but was also $105,000 in debt from the securities he had managed at the firm. This financial trouble resulted from numerous failed transactions he made during that time. Eventually, Mark was fired and lost his trading license. However, he didn't give up and found a new job at a technology investment firm called Momentum Securities, located across the street from his previous workplace. During this time, he was struggling with mental health issues, but no one knew it. Mark was finally fired on July 29, 1999. Mark then visited his former workplace, Momentum Securities in Atlanta. Upon entering, he spoke with several former colleagues. They found nothing unusual about their conversation and later expressed shock at Mark's subsequent actions. He suddenly drew 2 weapons and attacked. As a result, 4 people died on the spot. Before leaving, he attempted to kill his boss and mentor, Burda. Fortunately, Burda survived. Mark's actions were not random. He had a clear intent. He specifically targeted the office of his former employer, Momentum Securities, where he had been fired for embezzlement. He then planned to continue the attack at a neighboring firm, All Tech Investment Group, where he had also been fired, Calmly crossing the street amid the chaos, he entered and encountered Kevin Dial, the office manager. Without saying a word, Mark attacked Kevin in the chest, killing him instantly. The situation escalated when Mark went on to kill 3 other traders, causing panic as people rushed to escape. Immediately afterward, Mark entered the conference room and began attacking the employees inside. The first person he injured was the company's co-founder. By the time the police arrived, the building was sealed off, and Mark had already fled. In the chaos, he managed to escape, but one witness saw him navigate through the crowd, get into a green minivan, and drive away. This witness remembered the vehicle's license plate and reported it to the arriving officers, which helped them identify Mark by checking the car's information in their database. Unfortunately, they could not track him down immediately. He vanished in an unknown direction, and efforts to follow the car were unsuccessful. As a result, the police turned to the media to share information about the incident and seek assistance from the public. They needed to warn people that Mark, a dangerous individual with a weapon, was on the loose. Within the first 30 minutes, tips started coming in. An employee at a gas station reported seeing Mark fill up his car and drive off. Additionally, a girl contacted the police, stating that an unknown man had attacked her, left a weapon with her, and threatened her. Fortunately, she was able to escape from him. The police quickly realized that Mark seemed intent on taking a hostage to facilitate his escape. Afterward, they were able to trace his movements, and a large-scale pursuit began, which concluded rapidly. Mark found himself trapped in a dead end, surrounded. As the police approached his car and drew their weapons, a loud bang rang out. In a desperate attempt to avoid capture, he attacked himself in the head, realizing that his escape plan had failed. As a result, he died on the spot. Now, investigators needed to determine what led Mark to resort to violence. Detectives visited his home, hoping to speak with his second wife, Lee. When they couldn't reach her by phone, suspicions arose that she might have fled. The authorities suspected that Mark could have had an accomplice and might still be planning further violence. It was puzzling that a well-educated businessman would suddenly turn to armed violence. However, when the police searched the house, they discovered something entirely unexpected. In the master bedroom closet, they found that Lee had been beaten to death. They also discovered the bodies of Mark's 2 children, Michelle and Matthew, who had also been beaten to death in their beds. The children's bodies were left uncovered, with towels wrapped around their heads so that only their faces were exposed. The police identified the murder weapon, a baseball bat, which Mark had used to smash the heads of his family members. Forensic analysis indicated that Mark killed Lee 2 days before the tragic incident at Momentum Securities. The following day, he attacked his children in the living room. A letter left at the crime scene provides details of what happened. On the morning of July 27, 1999, Mark decided to kill Lee. He claimed to have planned an unforgettable weekend for his children, which he saw as a farewell. In a letter, Mark confessed to killing Lee and her 2 children from a previous marriage, Matthew and Michelle, while they were sleeping. After killing his family, Mark covered their bodies with sheets and placed notes on each of them. Investigators discovered symbolic gifts with the children, a teddy bear and a handwritten note on Michelle's chest, and a similar note along with a video game on Matthew's body. Both notes were dated July 29. Mark did not explain his motives clearly, believing no one would understand his actions. Instead, he expressed his deep hatred for life and societal values, which he had felt for months leading up to his drastic choice. He claimed to have loved his family and hoped to reunite with them in heaven. He aimed to kill them quickly and painlessly, thinking that the children would suffer without their parents, and he believed God would take care of them in the afterlife. Detectives believe Mark was dishonest in a letter he wrote, in which he claimed that he saw death as his only escape. Instead, He planned to let Lee and the children die with him. He did not die immediately after the massacre. Rather, he attacked his workplace and fled. Mark initially intended to start a new life, but felt compelled to die when he realized he would face prison. In total, 9 of his former colleagues and 3 family members died, while 13 others were injured but survived. However, many people think that Deborah and Eloise should also be counted among the victims. At the time, his children were 8 and 11 years old, and his young wife Lee was 27. Before going to Alabama, Mark intended to take the lives of those he believed wanted him dead. His first wife, Deborah, often expressed to her loved ones that moving to Alabama marked the start of his downfall. After moving in, Mark's work performance declined rapidly, leading to his dismissal. He was later caught sabotaging company data, but this incident was kept low profile to avoid damaging the startup's reputation. As a result, Mark received a short prison sentence. Having lost all his money and faced multiple firings, Mark became despondent. The police found similarities between the murders of his first wife, Deborah, and her mother, Eloise, who were both killed in a trailer. Mark is the prime suspect, but has consistently denied any involvement, yet the police consider him guilty. The murders shared a similar method, and the same weapon was used. Additionally, he was the only one with a strong motive. He also had access to their home and was among the few who knew where Deborah was with Eloise, as there were hardly any strangers in that area. Neighbors were aware of Mark's frequent arguments with Deborah, leading them to believe he was the one who had killed her. Currently, it is impossible to prove Mark's involvement in the deaths of Deborah and Eloise, as Mark, the only person who could have confessed to the crime, has since died. Authorities suspect that Mark's motive for attacking Deborah was the insurance payout he received shortly after the murder. He used this money to support his trading career, favoring high-risk investments that ultimately failed. The reason he blamed those around him for his financial losses in the stock market remained unclear. None of Mark's colleagues understood his aggression, especially since his targets were just ordinary workers doing their jobs. These individuals had done nothing to harm him and were not responsible for his failures or job loss. The case of Daniela Tabares. Daniela Tabares was born on May 8, 1998, in Cali, Colombia. She is the only child of Isabel Tabares, a single mother. Daniela did not know her father and had never met him. Their life was not easy. Her mother raised her alone. She lived with her mother, her grandfather, and her maternal uncle, who supported the family during difficult times. For many years, Isabel worked at a bank and saved some money. However, in 2010, when Daniela was 12 years old, Isabel was laid off from the bank and had difficulty finding a new job. To solve her financial problems, Isabel decides to use her savings for a trip to Florida, USA, where she believes there are more opportunities. However, she realized her savings were insufficient for the journey, so she borrowed money from several neighbors, promising to repay them once she secured a job in the United States. Isabel received support from her 2 older sisters, who had settled in the United States. They invited her to live with them and share the rent, helping her not to worry about housing. While Daniela attended school, Isabel began working as a cleaner. She was very determined and hardworking, with the desire to create a better life for herself and her daughter. Her sisters also helped her by sharing advice on how to succeed in America. Isabel realized that in order to become independent, she needed to be self-sufficient and start her own business. Within a year, she saved enough money to obtain a license and start her own business. Although she had to work hard, she always prioritized her daughter Daniela, whom she loved the most. At the same time, Daniela attended Coral Springs High School in Florida. As a sociable girl, she easily made friends with many people. Initially, she was close to fellow students who were also immigrants, as they had much in common. After that, she made friends with many others. It seemed that everything was going well. Isabel quickly paid off her debt to her neighbors. She even started considering renting her own apartment to avoid burdening her sisters. She took her time to save more money and regain her stability. She successfully carried out her plans. Her small business grew and began generating income. She worked hard, and her efforts paid off. During this time, she met Shu, a Colombian with 2 children. They quickly understood each other because they had both gone through hardships after moving to the United States. Besides, Isabel also learned about the culture of a new country, expanded her business, and increased her knowledge. Isabel and Daniela often did everything together and supported each other. Isabel credits their close relationship as one of the key factors in her success. Daniela is a sociable, kind girl and makes friends easily, which helps her have no trouble living in the United States. However, she was concerned about gaining weight during her teenage years. Instead of giving up, she was determined to overcome her problems. She started exercising and living a healthy lifestyle, avoiding fast food. These daily habits helped her achieve her ideal figure. Daniela's achievements inspired Isabel, and she decided to join a sports club near their home in Coral Springs. By that time, Daniela had been attending the club for a while. Seeing her daughter's perfect figure, Isabel also wanted to take better care of herself. However, she was very busy with her business, which took a lot of energy. After a few months, she was so tired that she refused to go to the gym. She plans to return to the gym later, but for now, she decided to prioritize her business. Daniela, on the other hand, decided to continue training. She was very happy with the changes in her body and figure that she had achieved. Even though her mother didn't go to practice with her, she had enough friends in the club to train with during most sessions. One of them was Carolina Miller, a 40-year-old woman whom Daniela met during training. They quickly found harmony and started training together in 2017. Despite facing challenges like migration and a language barrier, Daniela graduated from high school, proving that she could overcome difficulties and was ready to fight for her future. Furthermore, she wants to pursue higher education, but she needs financial support. Her mother's business wasn't enough to cover her college expenses, so she took a job as a switchboard operator at a gym, where she trained for many years. At the same time, she also learned about criminology, a field she was very passionate about and dreamed of building a career in. By 2019, at the age of 21, she was able to become independent. She was in her prime and busy planning for the future. Daniela enrolled at a local university to pursue her education and achieve her dreams. She transformed from a shy schoolgirl into a confident young woman. She was not only attractive and charming, but also passionate about her job at the fitness club. Her enthusiasm caught the attention of the owners of the sports complex, and they offered her a position in the gym. She became a coach, encouraging people to participate in sports and supporting beginners. Her main goal was to inspire others, and she worked with many different groups, sharing her passion. She also organized weekly group activities to promote teamwork and camaraderie within the sports organization. Daniela then met Yvonne Serrano, a woman of Panamanian descent. An active individual, Yvonne enjoyed sports and had never experienced any legal or substance abuse problems. She was generally considered a respectable person and avoided dangerous relationships. However, she lived in a troubled neighborhood, so she purchased several registered firearms for self-defense. By 2019, Yvonne decided to invest more in sports and joined inspirational classes taught by Daniela. However, due to frequent travel and the difficulty of making friends, she felt different from the other participants. Although she seemed unapproachable and a bit withdrawn, she always attended all the classes and was determined to change her life. On the evening of November 22, 2019, Daniela and her group planned to go to the movies and then return home. However, they decided to change their plans and go to a local bar called World of Bear in Coconut Creek after the screening. Since Daniela had work to finish the next day, she did not want to stay at the bar for long. During the night, she called her mother, Isabel, several times. Isabel was worried about her daughter going to the bar because she thought it was unsafe. Daniela reassured her mother that she would not be drinking and would only stay for a short time, planning to return home around 1 a.m. The group eventually met at the bar in hopes of having a fun evening. After some time, Daniela's friend Carolina approached Yvonne and advised her that she had had too much to drink. Yvonne was sitting outside, holding hands with some strange young men. Carolina suggested that Yvonne join the group inside the bar, but this made her uncomfortable, and she became angry and shouted. When she returned inside, her behavior became more aggressive, and it was obvious she was intoxicated. Despite this, the evening was still going well, and Daniela lost track of time. Later that night, Daniela's mother, Isabel, sent her daughter a text message, expressing her concerns about potential dangers. Daniela replied that she would be home early. As the team leader, Daniela needs to oversee everything and make sure everyone gets home safely. Sensing that something was off, Isabel decided to wait for her daughter. She lay in bed, unable to sleep, waiting for Daniela to return. By 2 a.m., Daniela still had not come back from the bar, and Isabel's worry grew. Each time she saw car headlights outside, she got up to check, hoping to see Daniela in the driveway, but the cars just drove by. She texted her daughter again but received no reply. Realizing it was too late to call Daniela's friends, she tried to reassure herself that her daughter was likely with a friend. She thought about the possible reasons why the girl was quiet. The phone was out of battery or the signal was bad, and finally convinced herself that everything was fine, then went to sleep. At 5:55 a.m., County Emergency Services received a distressing call. A woman reported seeing a lifeless girl in a parked car near her home. Several police officers quickly arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area. They spoke with the witness, a 51-year-old named Yvonne Serrano. Meanwhile, at 6 a.m., Isabel woke up and noticed that Daniela had not yet returned home. She felt exhausted, having only slept for 3 to 4 hours, but she needed to prepare for work and clean the offices. Unable to reach Daniela, she called Carolina, hoping that her daughter had arrived at Carolina's house and was still asleep. However, Carolina replied that she did not know where Daniela was. She felt confident that Daniela would make it home safely, even if she had been drinking, because there were plenty of people nearby with cars who could help. However, Carolina can't stop thinking about the incident with Yvonne at the bar and wonders if it has anything to do with the current situation. To find out more about what happened after she left, she called her friends from the gym. She was shocked to learn that her group of friends had returned home and that no one knew anything about Daniela. Feeling guilty for leaving Daniela, Carolina decided to go to the police to report her missing. The officer on duty informed her that Daniela had already been found. At that moment, several police officers were at Isabel's house delivering the devastating news of her daughter's death. They spoke with Isabel to gather important details for the investigation. It was difficult to calm Isabel when she heard the news. She began to cry loudly and asked what had happened. Daniela was her only daughter, and in that moment, her world fell apart. Police then carefully inspected the girl's car that Yvonne reported, which was found near Isabel's house. Inside the vehicle, they discovered an ID card and a bag containing personal items. By checking the license plates, they identified the car's owner as 20-year-old Daniela Tabares, who was found deceased inside the car. During her initial meeting with the police, Yvonne claimed she was on her way to the gym early that morning when she stumbled upon the car. She stated that she did not know Daniela. The officers then inquired about Yvonne's whereabouts the previous evening. She admitted that she had attended a party and had drunk excessively, even losing consciousness at the bar. She said that she had only woken up in the morning, lying in bed with no memory of the night, including how she had gotten home. Afterward, the police continued to analyze the evidence found in the car, but soon realized they needed more details. It was clear that Yvonne knew Daniela, prompting detectives to return to her for additional information. Unexpectedly, Yvonne's story changed. She now claimed that at 5:50 a.m., she woke up in the passenger seat of the car, next to Daniela, and saw her lifeless body in the driver's seat. Shocked by the discovery, Yvonne immediately called the police, admitting that she had previously lied for fear of being considered a suspect. The situation was devastating for everyone who knew Daniela, particularly her mother, Isabel. The Latin American community rallied together to raise funds for Isabel, and many local residents joined in to support her. Meanwhile, the police were conducting an investigation, which quickly indicated that Daniela had been murdered. Forensic experts discovered shell casings inside her car and collected several fingerprints from both the inside and outside of the vehicle for analysis. They were also awaiting the results of Daniela's autopsy, which would provide further insights. Police then began interviewing individuals who had been with Daniela that evening and collected CCTV footage from the bar where they had gathered. It was confirmed that Daniela had not had any conflicts. The night had gone smoothly. However, multiple witnesses reported that Yvonne had been drinking heavily and was very attached to the group at the bar. In contrast, Daniela chose not to drink that night to avoid any issues. A girl offered to drive her home, and Daniela accepted. Their movements were tracked to the parking lot exit at 1:30 a.m., where they left the nightclub calmly, as confirmed by the last person to see Daniela alive. The preliminary report from the medical examiner indicated that the death occurred around 2 a.m., which was the exact time when Yvonne left the bar to go home. By then, Yvonne had already become the main suspect in the murder. The police wanted to find out what she had been doing for the 4 hours before she reported the incident to them. They then found that she had been busy. She had deleted messages from her phone with Daniela, deleted the video from the front door camera, and changed clothes. She had also washed the outfit she had worn that night at the bar. It was clear that she was trying to cover up evidence of the crime. The police decided to arrest Yvonne Serrano and hold her in jail while they investigated further. Once the final results of the forensic examination were in, she was charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Despite the accusations, Yvonne has maintained her innocence and stood her ground. On November 27, 2019, Daniela Tabare's funeral took place, attended by many people, including club members, friends, and family. All were deeply saddened by this tragedy. She was cremated in December. A few weeks after the crime, the district attorney's office decided to pursue lesser charges against Yvonne. It was believed that proving premeditation would be challenging, so the charge was classified as unintentional murder, which could result in a maximum of 30 years in prison. She could potentially receive bail before the hearing and be released by the Supreme Court, which upset Daniela's mother. Following these developments, progress on the case stalled for unclear reasons. By March 2020, Daniela's family became aware that the case was not receiving adequate investigation. There was limited evidence, and Yvonne might avoid punishment altogether. Friends and family organized social media campaigns and protests to raise public and media awareness of Daniela's death. They want Yvonne to be held accountable for her actions. One such protest occurred on March 4, when Daniela's colleagues left the gym and marched to the court where the preliminary hearing was being held. They argued that Yvonne should not be granted bail during these proceedings. The prosecutor's office believes that she has a high possibility of absconding, so she is not allowed to go free while waiting for the next hearing. The lawyer requested that the judge set a low bail amount, no more than $40,000, arguing that if Yvonne wore an ankle monitor, she would not be able to flee, and claimed that the prosecution had exaggerated the situation. Additionally, Yvonne would participate in a rehabilitation program and undergo a mental health assessment. Ultimately, the judge decided on a bail amount of $100,000, which was higher than the initial request before the trial took place. Yvonne must remain at a specialized rehabilitation center and is only allowed to leave to meet with her legal team. Yvonne later underwent a ballistics test, which confirmed that the bullet came from her weapon. Additionally, authorities gathered credible evidence showing attempts to destroy evidence after the crime, and she was captured on CCTV by neighbors. This information prompted the prosecutor's office to pursue charges of premeditated assault and murder. It was believed that an argument broke out between Yvonne and Daniela while they were in the car, leading to Yvonne's aggressive behavior. The prosecution successfully persuaded the jury, and on August 12, 2024, 56 years old Yvonne Serrano was found guilty of premeditated murder. She received a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Isabel had a tattoo inked on her shoulder in memory of her daughter, Daniela, as a reminder of her fight for justice. Unfortunately, the exact incident between Yvonne and Daniela in the car that night remain unclear. She has not admitted to the crime and has not explained her reasons for her actions.